Carzon that we had? I'm sorry, thank you.
Hi guys, we're going live hearing
Christy Klamer
on election fraud in
Grace
Michigan
Norris,
concerning the TCF Center in
followed by
Detroit.
Jeffrey Gorman.
The hearing is in Lansing.
Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. So my name is Christy Klamer. I'm a registered voter from Oakland County. I was a poll challenger at TCF on November 3rd from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and November 4th from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 a.m. on November 5th. I was there for a total of 35 hours. In those 35 hours, I experienced the chain of custody being broken in many different ways. I'm going to focus on 3 of them. Around 7:30 a.m. on November 3rd, over the microphone, everyone was asked how many Republican poll workers there were by a show of hands. When announced there were 2, I looked around and couldn't see any hands going up from where I was sitting. Not having at least one Republican poll worker at the 134 tables made it impossible for ballots to be duplicated legally. Also, there were no Republican poll workers to see the ballots being secured at the end of the process as well. Almost all the poll workers were told that they could go home at 11:30, this is on November 4th, p.m., even though none of the ballots were secured until hours after that. Tables with ballots were left unattended and not secure. And even at the end of the night, when they were pretty much wrapping up, I started going through every single one of them, and there was 8 that were locked, but they were not locked. We made sure they were locked. I think it was unintentional, but concerning. Also, I witnessed 46 ballots get put in manually, meaning they were not in the electronic system and they were not in the paper poll books. I recorded each name and ballot number along with how they had the birth date of 1/1/1900. I witnessed majority of these ballots.
This is the third witness
9 p.m. and 11 p.m. on November 4th.
that witnessed the birth date 1/1/1900 over and over.
Attacks throughout the day. This came from Democrat challengers, independents, a lawyer, team leaders, supervisors. I was certain to be escorted out by a Democrat lawyer.
And the antagonization.
How secure
they got
our
every
elections
Republican
are
antagonized and escorted out.
It's very disturbing and disheartening. As you've heard today, there is much credible evidence that the chain of custody was broken time and time again, which created an election with no integrity. Michigan citizens are needing to trust our election system and our state. We are asking for a fair and honest election to be certified. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Klamer. Any members have a question? Well, thank you very much. You've submitted your testimony in writing? Okay, thank you. Next, we have Grace Norris, followed by Jeffrey Gorman, followed by Jennifer Seidel. At the top of the hour, the chairman will take a 5-minute break for everybody, and I'll read off who's on the deck after that this time so we can be sure to expedite coming back to order. Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee, Ms. Norris. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a challenger at TCF Center from November 4th to November 5th, and I'm a registered voter in Ingham County. You can tell that I'm a new citizen. I love to learn things, and I love this country. So that's why I became a poll challenger. So I received my credential and waiting in line since 12th.
All right, we do apologize for that. Looks like the feed's having some issues there, but we'll work to get that back for you. They are going to take a quick break, though, as you heard them say, but that was a live look from Lansing, Michigan. Hearing's been underway today about election integrity in the state, and today's hearing has included members of the Trump campaign legal team, the state legislature, and of course, witnesses who claim to have evidence of voter fraud. And this comes after some similar hearings were held in Arizona and Pennsylvania recently to ensure accuracy in the 2020 election results. We will continue to bring you live coverage of that. Looks like we do have that feed back up. So let's go back now live.
Well, yay! Because that was a military ballot, and I saw later, and that's why I remember this and know this name. And then the fourth thing was the printing of the remarks and the voter list at the end of counting took as long as 4 hours. So the last shift was supposed to end by 9 p.m., but some of the prints did not get done until 1:30 a.m. on the 5th. And so one table had a gentleman tried to print a dozen times and failed, so he got so frustrated and he put his backpack on and just left without signing anything. So that's the fifth scenario I saw was
1 minute.
okay, thank you. So at about midnight, people called in and told them if they couldn't say they could leave. So sometime later, there were only like 2/3 of people left. So the other thing I counted as, how many workers at each table left at that time. So I have the details, but I don't mention it here. So 7. So one of the male Democrat poll challengers kept talking about, Joe Biden and Donald Trump. We were not supposed to talk about politics. And 8, some of the strip on the ballot cases were not put on, and some postal mailbox were left open there, and that was concerning. So then I tried. The last thing was, I was writing down the SEO number, and then 2 Democrats, stood, blocked my view, and the 8th supervisor came over, grabbed my credential, and took full advantage left. So that's how I was treated. I hope that we had that process, so people can trust the system. And I came here for freedom and for liberty, but this was so disappointing. And I hope that our legislators will do something, make better policy to fix up the loopholes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time today and your testimony. Any questions?
Just very
Senator Tice.
Grace, it's amazing to see you. Thank you for all that you've done. She has worked her tail off for American integrity and elections. So I just wanted to say thank you. I know personally your efforts, and I very much appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I love this country. I'm a country.
Okay, we'll have time for one more, and then, like I said, the chair will take a break. So right now, we're looking for Jeffrey Gorman. Please come forward. And then on deck for after our break will be Jennifer Seidel, Jasmine Early, and Artisha Bolmer. Mr. Gorman, welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. You have 3 minutes.
Yeah, my name is Jeff Gorman. I live in Wayne County, Garden City. Born and raised in Michigan, spent most of my life away from here, left when I was 17, came back 9 years ago. I was a retired Navy captain, retired airline pilot, captain as well. And so integrity is very important to me because lives depend on it. I also went to a college where we had an honor concept, so we kind of frown on lying, cheating, and stealing. Well, I volunteered to be a poll challenger on the day after the election. Welcome Alice to the belly of the beast. It was a hostile environment from the Democratic lawyer that told me I didn't know what I was talking about when I was challenging, to I was briefed on 2 things to look for. One was when they were doing duplicate ballots, there was supposed to be a Republican and a Democratic witness. When they were doing the military ballots, I asked, where's the Republican witness? And they said, it's you. And I said, no, it has to be a paid worker. She says, well, I don't know what they are. The supervisor did. I don't know what they are. Ask them. So I asked him. The poll worker said, I ain't going to tell you. So it was obvious. I challenged it. They only, out of the 8 to 10 that I saw, they only took the challenge for the first one. They wouldn't record the challenge for the other ones. And the other thing I was told to watch out for was ballots that the name of the voter did not appear in the electronic or the supplemental. They had 2 that came in that met that criteria. They sent them back. They came back to the table again, so they raised the red flag to ask the kind of supervisor, whatever the person's name is that was supposed to come in. She told them, oh, well, we checked these are on the list, so I'm going to show you how to get them and enter them in into the computer so that they appear, and then we can tabulate this. And they use the fictitious 1900 birth date.
Number 4.
So I was only there for 2.5 hours. That was after in the hostile environment. I got there at 12:30. Tried to go in at 2 o'clock. They wouldn't allow us to come in, even though we know Republicans, poll watchers had left and they need to be replaced. They wouldn't let us in until 6 o'clock is when I got in. At 6:06 in Book 1, I was recorded. Left at 8:30. For those full 2.5 hours,
1 minute.
I watched violations of the rules that I was told to watch out for. Now, I said about my jobs, integrity was important because lives depended on it. Well, it's no less any important that we have integrity in the election because the life of the country as a democratic republic depends on it. This nonsense has got to stop. We got to take the steps that it takes that the legislature can take to make sure that we have fair elections. Because I've never seen anything like this before. And like I said, this goes against my grain and everything that I know as a person, as a professional. And like I said, I don't want to ever see anything like that again.
Thank you very much for your testimony. How many members have questions? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Gorman. Again, we'll be hearing next from Jennifer Seidel, Jasmine Early, and Artisha Bomer. And I beg everyone's indulgence in a 5 to 10 minute recess. Thank you.
All right, and for our viewers, that was a live look from Lansing, Michigan, as a hearing is underway there about election integrity in the state. Today's hearing does include members of the Trump campaign legal team, the state legislature, and witnesses who claim to have evidence of voter fraud. This does come after similar hearings were held in both Arizona and Pennsylvania to ensure accuracy in the 2020 election results. They're taking a quick break there from that hearing, but we will continue to bring you live coverage of that as soon as it does get back underway there in Michigan. But in the meantime, we do want to welcome you to this hour of Wall to Wall here on One American News. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Greta Wall. A group of senators unveiled a bipartisan coronavirus stimulus package. Lawmakers proposed that $908 billion package today. The bill would allocate $160 billion to local and state governments and another $288 billion to small businesses through the Paycheck Protection Program. Legislators hope the bill will provide short-term relief against coronavirus-related lawsuits as well. Meantime, Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said that he will likely resume stimulus talks with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
I will be speaking to the Speaker this afternoon. We're going to talk. We are on the appropriations issue and keeping the government running. That is the first priority, and I'm sure we'll also be mentioning COVID issues.
Okay, guys, I cannot
Mnuchin said
pause
President Trump would like to see
the live
funding for
stream
small
and then
businesses.
bring it back up.
Talks
So
for a
I'm
new
just going to
economic relief bill
continue the
stalled
stream.
in recent months over
At you
partisan
guys.
disagreements. Officials are optimistic.
You heard that.
the
10-minute
coronavirus
recess. They'll be
vaccine
back.
As multiple companies file for emergency approval from the FDA. Here's the details.
Lieutenant General Paul Ostrowski of Operation Warp Speed says 100% of Americans will have the opportunity to take a COVID vaccine by June of 2021. He made those remarks Monday while speaking to MSNBC. And that's not the only development on the vaccine front. In a press release the same day, biotech company Moderna said it plans to apply for emergency use authorization from the FDA.
We're going to be filing around the world regulatory approval for products for the regulators to review it. And hopefully, given the FDA has told us that our advisory meeting is likely to be on December 17, it is highly possible that between the 17th and Christmas, the product is approved.
It's the latest candidate to reach that stage following Pfizer and BioNTech, which both have a vaccine already under regulatory review. If Moderna is granted authorization, its vaccine could be available as soon as December 21st. In light of the news, President Trump urged the FDA to act quickly, adding, quote, a great modern day miracle. Moderna has received $1 billion under Operation Warp Speed to fund its vaccine research. The company has also already taken a $1.5 billion order from the U.S. for the pre-manufacturing of 100 million doses of its vaccine, which the company says is 94.1% effective and expected to cost about $25 per dose. Moving forward, once the vaccine is approved, it would likely be distributed to high priority groups first, including frontline medical workers and likely residents of nursing homes.
But of course, we would expect that.
Distribute the coronavirus vaccine. Jackson Health System in Miami-Dade County is taking the necessary measures to safely store the vaccine prior to its distribution. Employees have installed a cold storage system and are being trained on proper vaccine handling procedures. Officials say they're expecting the vaccine later this month.
We are ready to make sure that we are deploying the vaccine to our employees. For those that choose to get vaccinated, we have a deployment plan for first high-risk employees and then for all employees that are interested.
Officials say Jackson Health System was among the first to be selected to receive the vaccine. It's a major health provider which has the ability to vaccinate a large number of employees and patients.
I'm going outside.
And Wall Street does rise amid a new month of trade as investors grow optimistic about the coronavirus vaccine. Let's take a live look at where the major indices are currently trading in today's session. Here's a look at that. You can see the Dow up at about 280 points, hovering around that 30,000 point mark. The NASDAQ trading up about 200 points, nearly 1.5%, trading in record territory. And the S&P 500 also up in record territory. We will have your closing bell report later today. That'll be at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 Pacific. So be sure to tune in here to Wall to Wall for that. Well, Cyber Monday 2020 is officially the biggest online shopping day in U.S. history. Adobe Analytics says Americans spent $10.8 billion online on Monday. That was short of their original forecast for more than $12 billion, but still marked a 15.1% increase compared to last year. Analysts say online spending has been surging throughout the pandemic.
And in fact, we've seen this surge in e-commerce throughout the year since March. We've been tracking the progress of the digital economy with our market-leading Adobe Analytics toolkit. It's been growing year over year tremendously since March.
Thanksgiving Day and Black Friday also set new records for online spending this year, as many stores spread out their sales for multiple days and moved them online. Well, Bitcoin soars to a record high, boosted by increased demand, as investors see the virtual currency as a hedge against inflation. Jonah Green has more.
Bitcoin soared to a record high against the dollar on Monday as its 2020 rally steamed ahead. The digital unit touched an all-time peak of $19,864.15, breaking its prior record set nearly 3 years ago. Bitcoin overall has gained more than 170% this year, fueled by demand for riskier assets amid unprecedented fiscal and monetary stimulus, hunger for assets perceived as resistant to inflation, and expectations that cryptocurrencies would win mainstream acceptance. Bitcoin's 12-year history has been peppered with steep gains and equally sharp drops. Compared to traditional assets, its market is highly opaque. But analysts say the Bitcoin market has evolved since 2017, now boasting a functioning derivatives market and custody services by major financial firms.
Well, the NASDAQ is proposing new rules aimed at increasing diversity at the top levels of companies listed on the stock exchange. The organization announced today it's seeking approval from the Securities and Exchange Commission for a series of new measures related to board diversity and disclosure. Under the proposals, companies would be required to have at least one woman and one underrepresented minority or member of the LGBTQ community on their board of directors. Only a quarter of companies listed on the NASDAQ currently meet that requirement. Approved, firms will be expected to have at least one female or minority board member within 2 years. And still ahead here on a wall-to-wall, Seattle approves a controversial restitution program. What this means for offenders in the city. Plus, California
Welcome to the semifinals!
The Super Six. Fight for a spot in the finale. It is a triple unmasking. The Masked Singer semifinals. All new 2 hours tomorrow on Fox. The talent of the Super Six has never been greater.
Welcome to the semifinals!
Now they'll give the performance of a lifetime. And that was a religious experience as they fight for a spot in the finale. She came to win! By the end of the night, only 3 will be left standing. It is a triple unmasking. The Masked Singer semifinals. All new 2 hours tomorrow on Fox.
Just because a car looks like a good deal online, it doesn't mean it is. That's why CarGurus looks deeper. We consider every detail, from rating cars from overpriced to great. On other sites, more than 6 of every 10 cars are labeled good. On CarGurus, only 3 of 10 cars earn our highest ratings. So instead of wondering if a car is a deal, you'll feel better knowing it is. Go to CarGurus today and shop safely with CarGurus contactless services.
Welcome back. The lack of a police force is putting the safety of a small South Carolina community in limbo. The town of Pine Ridge in Lexington County was left after its interim police chief resigned last month and followed suit. In his resignation letter, interim chief Vincent Solano blamed his departure on the town's mayor. He accused Mayor Robert Wells of meddling in the department's affairs and creating a hostile work environment. For now, Lexington County deputies will help keep the town's population of 2,000 safe, but people are worried if they'll be able to respond quickly enough when law enforcement is needed. Officials in King County, Washington approve a controversial restitution program. Here's more on why some residents are worried the new policies will promote crime.
Washington State's most populated county is establishing new controversial programs to address its more than 7,000 court cases which await action. The initiative includes using nonprofit community groups to decide the fate of offenders rather than a judge. In response to many crime cases stemming from Black Lives Matter riots and social justice riots earlier this year, the left-leaning city council recently unanimously voted to give criminals a massive hall pass.
If we can send that person instead to a community account.
All right, we do actually want to take our viewers live to Arlington, Virginia, where the Amistad Project is holding a press briefing with 3 whistleblowers who have evidence of widespread voter fraud. Let's listen in.
Several whistleblowers is releasing evidence of intentional fraudulent conduct to improperly influence the 2020 election. This evidence includes eyewitness accounts, eyewitness corroboration, and the review and assessment of tangible evidence, which supports and corroborates the statements of witnesses. Moreover, there are institutions and persons available to you who hold within their possession or within their knowledge, who can easily decide to be forthcoming and confirm the sworn statements of these whistleblowers and the other evidence which we are releasing today. Many of the people who can answer these questions thus far have refused access to the information. They have refused access to data or to share personal experiences. Refusal in such instances is done for a reason. People engage in conduct for a reason. People refuse to speak and decide to not be forthcoming. They do it for a reason. Generally, this refusal comes down to one or two reasons or a mixture of both. They are afraid, or they have done something or participated in something which they do not want others to know about. You will hear evidence detailing how 130,000 to 280,000 completed ballots which persons or a person or a machine completed, put in the envelope, placed return addresses on, and then those ballots, 130,000 to 280,000, were transported from Bethpage, New York, into Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where they disappeared on October 21st of this year. Let me restate that again. This evidence demonstrates, and it's through eyewitness testimony that's been corroborated by others through their eyewitness statements, that 130,000 to 280,000 completed ballots for the 2020 general election were shipped from Bethpage, New York to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where those ballots and the trailer in which they were shipped disappeared. Also, the evidence that we have obtained indicates that on several occasions, completed ballots were shipped from a postal facility in Bethpage, New York, a postal facility that has no mail processing role in the United States Postal Service, a postal service facility that has no ability to receive incoming mail because it does not have the machines to process that mail, a postal service facility, which from persons that we've spoken with, has no basis to have completed ballots on its premises. This evidence demands investigation. This evidence demands answers. The American people
Facebook is censoring
deserve
this.
such answers.
Nobody's seeing it.
We have and we are in the process of sharing this information with law enforcement. We have been contacted and we have communicated with offices for the FBI as well as United States attorneys in various jurisdictions in this nation. We have also been in contact with local prosecutors who are aware of some of our evidence. I can't speak to the scope of their investigations or to the status of their investigations. With me today are, on my right, on your left, Colonel Tony Schaefer. Colonel Schaefer has been our lead investigator for the Amistad Project, and he also accompanied me in our interview and debriefing with Mr. Jesse Morgan, who is seated next to him, who will share his story today. And Colonel Schaefer will also explain some of what Jesse will tell you that he saw and experienced on October 21st. To my left is Ethan Pease. Ethan Pease worked for a subcontracting firm for the United States Postal Service. And he's going to relate to you a story that occurred in Wisconsin when he arrived at a postal facility. Madison? Thank you, Ethan. In Madison, Wisconsin. And by two separate people on two separate days was informed that ballots were being gathered on November 4th and backdated on November 3rd, tens of thousands of ballots to be delivered and counted by postal workers in that facility. To my left and to your far right is Gregory Stenstrom. Mr. Stenstrom is a computer expert. He also was a poll watcher in Delaware County. During that process, and he will describe this for you, and he's also testified, I believe, before the Pennsylvania legislature recently, he will describe to you how he was denied access. All of you know those stories. And again, I just want to mention that people deny access for a reason. They don't follow the law for a reason. And denying access to the counting room was a violation of law. We've experienced an unprecedented election in American history where America was kicked out of the counting room. All of us remember looking at the hanging chads and the dimpled chads and debating what the intent of the voter was, and that is right for America to participate in that debate. For the first time in our nation's history, in our urban core, in swing states, America was kicked out of the counting room. And you must ask, why? Why? Gregory Stenstrom will share something with you that might indicate the why. Because the conduct of the officials that he witnessed and of a private party violated all of the rules to maintaining an integrity the election and cast serious doubt upon the management of the election in Delaware County. And his observations have been mirrored elsewhere as well. Mr. Jesse Payne. Mr. Jesse Payne, to my is a subcontractor, drives a truck for a subcontractor of the United States Postal Service. He's going to tell you his story here in a moment, but I want to help set the scene for you regarding that story. Jesse is not here to tell you that the election was stolen. He's not here to tell you that he knows enormous fraud occurred. He's here to tell you what he saw. And at great personal cost, he's willing to tell you what he saw. Don't put the burden of proving fraud on this man's shoulders. He's come here to tell you what he saw. On October 21st, Jesse was engaged in, well, let me back up. I'm sorry, Peter, let me back up. I'm going to back up because I'm going to do this backwards. You know, generally when I investigate, I oversaw the Kansas Bureau of Investigation as Attorney General, and additionally, I was a district attorney. And let me say, and if you will allow me, I'm going to ask you to indulge me in a couple of observations. And these observations, you might be redundant to your knowledge, but forgive me. No investigation starts with a conclusion. No investigation starts with a claim. Every investigation starts with questions. And so when you begin an investigation, you have to make sure that you're asking the right questions, and then you determine the most proper source to get answers for those questions so you can come to know what happened. And I want to invite all of you to participate in asking the right sources the right questions. Because some of the questions you will have are questions we cannot answer. But there are institutions and persons who have the answer. And they also control information such as video footage, such as logs, such as sign-in sheets for people who work there or volunteered there, such as GPS positioning for tractors and trailers that work for the United States Postal Service or haul their mail. There are a lot of institutions you can go to ask the right questions. And I would invite you to participate with us in asking the right questions. And I want to offer this observation regarding evidence. I've never investigated an innocent person who did not want me to see the evidence they controlled that proved their innocence. And I've never investigated a guilty person who wanted me to see the evidence they controlled that proved their guilt. Most all criminal investigations, in fact, any investigation begins with the knowledge that there's a body in the road. Somebody has been shot. Somebody called 911. And most real investigation is if there's not an immediate threat to the public and we don't know who we have to chase to arrest, begins with moving backwards, not forwards. You begin to investigate backwards. And so that's how I'm going to lead you through our discussion. And it will lead up to Jesse Payne's story. Jesse Morgan. Jesse Payne was a prosecutor who worked for me. I'm sorry, Jesse. Thank you. Let's look at the blood in the street. I'm taking you over to our lawsuits right over here. These are lawsuits that we have filed. This one is in Pennsylvania. Thank you, Peter. And if you keep it, yeah, you're bringing it up? Thank you, so I can see it. What you have right here is a chart of several charts, in fact. That's okay, buddy. It's okay. Then we'll just go to Georgia. This is our experts' analysis in Georgia of ballots called into question by the conduct of election officials that were in violation or sidestepped state election law. What you will see here is the first type, and let me tell you how we did this. We hired a data expert. We got the data from government. We hired some mathematicians to help crunch that data with them. And then we actually reached out and contacted voters directly to see if what they swore to as their conduct, whether they voted, whether they didn't vote, whether they requested the ballot, whether they didn't request the ballot, was mirrored by state records. And what you see right here is the estimate of illegal votes counted in Georgia at 15,331. Here is an estimate, I'm circling it, an estimate of Republican ballots that the Republican that we spoke with returned, but that state records show were not counted. 29,884. This is electors who voted where they did not reside in Georgia. 138,221. Out-of-state persons voting, 20,312. And double votes, 395. Total number of ballots in question, 204,143. We have these charts for each of the 5 states that we have recently initiated litigation in, and they will be provided to you. So how did this occur? How did it happen that these many ballots are called into question in this investigation? This is the blood in the street, so to speak. This is the evidence that something wrong occurred. Maybe not a crime. Maybe people were negligent. Maybe people did a poor job. But it certainly introduces questions that we must answer. And so we start to back up. And what we see in each one of these swing states is something else that hasn't happened before. It's the consolidation of counting centers. A dramatic consolidation in the urban core of the counting centers. Now, that was done, and the explanation was COVID, that it was necessary because of COVID. I will accept that at face value, accept the state. It doesn't make any sense to create a crowd to help protect against COVID. But nonetheless, they brought those persons together. Now, let's take a look at what happened in the counting centers, because there are also 2 other effects, even assuming that the proper purpose was COVID. What else happened in the counting centers? Well, I'll just take a couple of examples for you, and I'm sorry, again, I'm being redundant. You've heard this before, but it's important to understand it in the context of the story. In Michigan, I call it, what is the center called? TCF Center? The TCF Center in Michigan, the former hockey arena that they consolidated in Wayne County for the count. There were 134 counting or tables set up for each of those wards. Around them were inspectors. Those inspectors had the responsibility to take all ballots that they claimed couldn't run through the machine, and then set those ballots down, including all military ballots because of the paper that it's on. Look at those ballots, and then say this person meant to vote for Biden or for Trump, and fill out pristine new ballots These ballots would then separated and they would cast ballots for persons who weren't there, completing ballots of third parties who weren't there. The law allows that, by the way, because you want to be efficient in counting the ballot. But the law also says the two major parties must be at that table. They must be able to see what happened and then sign off that it was done validly. That's a way of putting America in the counting room. Both major political parties watching what happens. That's fair. That's transparent elections. In Wayne County, it didn't happen.
Like,
What they argued is that there was a Republican in the place. They put him in the penalty box and they couldn't see what was happening at the table. So whether you think that's nefarious or not, that's one of the results of the consolidation of the counting centers, is that they removed what the law required. And you had partisans completing these ballots without oversight from America or the other political party as the law requires. So people violate the law for a reason. What is the reason that they violated that law? Additionally, I can tell stories in Philadelphia. I can tell stories in Fulton County, Georgia. I can tell stories in Phoenix, Arizona. But you hear those stories. You know those affidavits. You know that that happened. There are serious questions that result from it. Additionally, consolidation of the counting facilities in conjunction with drop boxes, with the introduction of drop boxes. By the way, most of these drop boxes were paid for by Mark Zuckerberg's contribution to a group called the Center for Tech and Civic Life, and more on that a little bit later. Drop boxes hold anywhere from 4,000 votes or absentee ballots to up to 75,000 absentee ballots. This breached the chain of custody of the ballot in a significant way, unless these officials also, thank you, there's a drop box right here. And you might recall, as it relates to drop boxes, we were promised 24/7 security. We were promised videos to watch the drop boxes. By the way, has anybody seen the videos that these election officials for every drop box that was out there? We were promised that there would be integrity in the flow and chain of custody of these ballots. That means they must have logs of who had keys to the drop boxes. That means legitimately they have to have a 2-person per key system so that there's not one partisan who might pick up those ballots in a heavily Republican area and lose them on the way to the counting center, or vice versa, pick up ballots in the heavily Democrat area and lose them on the way to the counting center. Did they have 2-person, 1 key? Do they have the logs of when these drop boxes were picked up? Will they ever release video of these drop boxes as they promised? So far, we have demanded such information. It has been refused. People refuse for a reason. What is that reason? We have election experts that have been working with us who say that that conduct in breaking the chain of custody prevents the certification of the election process as applied under federal law, the Help America Vote Act. And we will have their testimony moving forward in numerous cases that the way that they did this election was not consistent with federal law in every one of these urban areas in every swing state. And the question is, why? Why not follow the law?
Yeah, why not?
So we started moving backwards. And as we move backwards to understand exactly what happened in these counting centers and recognize that all of these drop boxes and the consolidation of the counting centers allowed for and justified the delivery of tens of thousands of ballots, hundreds of thousands of ballots late in the election in one location with 1 truck or 2 trucks delivering in an area that is away from any partisan observers. We began to have more questions. You see, if you're going to infuse a lot of fraudulent ballots into a system with a machine counting system, you've got a couple of things you have to take care of. First of all, I see some of you with your computers. And Yeah, I remember my first computer was about this big, and it was less powerful than my watch. But now these things do amazing things. And they also count our ballots. But you can't see how they are counting them. You can't see in that machine. No one can unless you're able to have access and print off log how that machine has been operating. We have demanded the logs. There are certain types of logs that talk about the access the machine records. Any other access, it records all it's doing. No one produced logs. No one. Why? In fact, it is our belief that in some of these areas, the state contract actually allows the logs to be the proprietary property of the vendor. If that is the case, we have signed away our right to see how the machines are operating. That in and of itself should be a national controversy. But let me move on a little bit further as it relates to the machines. Gregory Stenstrom saw behavior in Delaware County, and there are affidavits elsewhere, that show intentional conduct that are a breach in election procedures and actually collectively. I'm not saying they did. It is a good question for them. Actually would allow the alteration of the count, but most certainly breaks the chain of custody from critical jump drives or V-chips to the machines, to the precinct, to the ballot. That makes auditing extraordinarily difficult. Intentional conduct that makes auditing the performance of those machines to the integrity of the count extraordinarily difficult. So right now I'd like to have Mr. Stenstrom come up and share with you what he experienced in Delaware County.
Thank you, Phil. I was a Republican poll watcher and observer in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. As I previously testified before a special committee of the Pennsylvania legislature in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania last Wednesday, I'm a citizen, a former commanding and executive officer in the Navy, a veteran of foreign wars, a data scientist, and an expert in security and fraud. I witnessed irregularities at 722 precincts on election day, primarily poll workers providing voters regular ballots instead of provisional ballots, when records indicated that those voters had requested mail-in ballots. But what I observed at the centralized Delaware County vote counting center when I arrived there at 6 p.m. and then over the next 3 days was a forensically destructive process that involved mail-in ballots, Dropbox ballots, and electronic USB V-card vote uploads. Despite possessing valid credentials, it was a 5-hour battle just to gain entry to the main counting room. And it would be another 3 days before I could secure a court order to observe the sequestered back rooms for 5 minutes for a period every 2 hours to observe ballots and how they were ingested. When I was finally allowed inside, I saw many boxes with 500 ballots each being carried in and out of the sequestered back room. The election officials in charge of operations refused to let me or other credential observers inside the room, even though we had every right to enter, and objected. There were disturbing breaches of protocol taking place in plain sight. At one point, I saw unsecured USB V-card drives from voting machines being separated from their accompanying cartridges and paper tapes and commingled together by election workers. These actions destroyed forensic auditability and corrupted the chain of custody. Formal objections to election officials and law enforcement officers that were present went unanswered. Later, I saw the voting machine supervisor for Delaware County carrying in unsealed bags of unsecured USB V-card drives, which he inexplicably proceeded to plug into computers, the vote counting computers, and upload into the official vote tally. Despite formal objections to senior law enforcement that was present and election board officials, he was allowed to continue. When he was finished, the vote count shot up by 50,000 votes for Vice President Biden. 47 USB cards were missing at the end of last week. As of today, that number has reportedly grown to 64. When I finally gained access to the sequestered room, this is 3 days later, where mail-in ballots were ingested, I witnessed 60 to 70,000 unopened mail-in ballots in sequestered back offices. That was on Thursday at 3:30. Accounted for. We don't know where they are. All signed paper chain of custody documents, just then and now, remain. Where did the ballots come from? Where did these mail-in ballots come from? And where did they go? Thank you for your time. Phil, appreciate being here.
And there's another question. Why? Why engage in conduct that you know destroys the chain of custody of this important material in a vital election? Unless there is an objective. People don't violate the law intentionally unless they have a reason. What could be the reason? And so we started to explore backwards again. I'm taking you backwards. How would you use that destruction of evidence, and why would it be necessary to destroy this evidence to engage in this conduct? Well, you have to understand what evidence is within the machine. What evidence is trying to be separated from us so that we do not know what happened. These machines capture images of the ballots. Those ballots, in fact, are tied down per precinct. The ballot design comes from the vendor itself, and they have to be specific with these updates to know, for example, if you move one precinct over, you might be voting for a different city council member. So there's a way to audit whether ballots were counted right within the precinct. And if you're going to infuse hundreds of thousands of ballots quickly, you might not be able to make sure that the right machine involved in the right count could count those ballots. Separating the chain of custody makes it extraordinarily more difficult. Another thing that you could do is not vote down ticket, so that that information doesn't cause a red flag. Moreover, on these ballots and in this process, there are barcodes that give us an awful lot of information that help us audit this process if we have access to the ballots themselves, which no one has been allowed to have access to. So now we got drop boxes, we got to break into chain of custody, we got all this alteration of election procedures, we've got different laws being applied in different ways in the same state, and we have the consolidation of county centers. But if you're going to make an impact in an election, you have to be able to control the vote of a certain number of people.
Seemed like it was going
So
down.
you can't just intercept and guess whether it's a Republican vote or a Democrat vote on the ballot. It doesn't make sense to just take a guess at a drop box and say that looks Republican, that looks Democrat. You can do some of that by the precinct and by the identification of the voter history in that area, but that is extraordinarily difficult to pull off. So how do you inject fraudulent ballots into the stream to be counted? Well, there are a couple of things, and I'm not saying that this is the path, but this reality, this truth demands questions and demands hard answers and hard evidence. We've had an unprecedented first-time partnership between blue state officials and private parties to share access to sensitive government information. I'll give you one example. Michigan. There's a company called NGP Van that is a tech firm that is left-leaning, that consolidates data, monetizes information, and helps Democrat candidates. They're also a fundraising arm for leftist causes. That's their job. That's how they make money. There's communication between Governor Whitmer, her political director, and the state health director in Michigan, where they are negotiating how to give NGP Van the contract for COVID tracing without anyone knowing of it. It was suggested that NGP create a subsidiary called Michigan Van, and that Michigan Van become a subcontractor for the general contractor on COVID tracing. I believe you all know all of the sensitive information that will be required by law to be turned over to COVID tracers if they knock on your door and hear that you were exposed to COVID. That's the type of data mining that people have made billions of dollars on. Once the whistle was blown on the negotiation of that contract, the governor disclaimed any knowledge of it, ordered her health officials to renege on the contract, and backed out of it. But there's more. The Secretary of State of Michigan and in Pennsylvania each engaged Rock the Vote to give them a front-side portal into the qualified voter files. You see, previously, if the League of Women Voters was conducting a voter registration drive, you would fill out a piece of paper. They would take that paper to the county clerk, election clerk, and only the clerk could enter that information into the qualified voter files. That's important for three primary reasons. The clerk is defined by geography. That gives an accountability to them. They are subject to Freedom of Information Act requests and demands for information, so you can hold them accountable if they enter fraudulent names. They also have political accountability. They are voted out of office if they fail. Rock the Vote has none of those checks upon them. These third parties don't have those checks upon them. Now, I will tell you, and you don't have to speak to many people, you know identity theft is a big issue in America. It's a big issue around the world. There are groups, and they don't have to have extraordinary talent, that can obtain personal information about you very easily. There's actually groups that consolidate data and sell them, like the National Change of Address reports, like reports regarding deaths, marriages, changes of name. All of those things are data that you can get and crunch. I could get your social security number with a little bit of work, not too much. So I'm not saying Rock the Vote did anything nefarious. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we have opened up a vulnerability on the front end of our voter rolls intentionally through these contracts. It would be very easy for a volunteer to suddenly create voters that weren't otherwise there. I'll give you an example. One of my colleagues at Liberty University School of Law, where I teach, a former acting dean, Rena Linda Volson. I've got Rena's affidavit here. She was born in Michigan as Annie Billis, B-I-L-A-S. She never registered to vote under that name. Her parents always called her Rena. As she grew up and she reached the age of majority, she changed her name. And by the way, changes of name and those lists are also available. She legally changed her name to Rena. So she was Rena Billis. Then she voted for Michael Dukakis. Not as Rena Billis, it might be after she was married, but she voted for Dukakis in 1994. She was a little bit hesitant for me to say that because she knows my history as a Republican. But she voted for Michael Dukakis. Then she moved out of Michigan. She got married, and now her name is Rena Linda Volson. And she hasn't been called Annie Billis since she was 18, and she never registered under that name. With all this talk of fraud, now what are the odds that Rena Linda Volson would go back and check at her Michigan registration when she's living in Virginia to see if she was registered under a name she never registered? You see, you can look at all these voting histories and you can tell who never votes. You can determine who's not going to check their voting history. You can also obtain names that center around their identity but are actually false. She was registered in Michigan as Annie Billis. Somebody did that. Not her, And the question is why? Well, I believe we're starting to get an understanding of the why. That was opened up to our voting rolls that had not been opened in this way before. Those are serious questions to ask those persons who opened up those portals. We have demanded and demanded and demanded the contracts. We had 10 FOIA requests. We're denied each one, and we just got them. And in our analysis, they pose significant problems for the operation of elections. Now, they will tell you, I assure you, that everything's fine. There's no fraud going on. Election official in Delaware County to get Gregory Stenstrom when he was trying to get in the room that he had the right to get into, and he saw people moving around. It was mail crates of ballots. Mail crates. And they said, I assure you, everything's fine. There's no fraud going on. At some point, that answer does not hold. At some point, it doesn't hold. So, and highlight about Gregory's statement is he saw those mail bins. I don't know if you know what I'm speaking about. We've got pictures of them somewhere up here, don't we, Peter? The actual mail bins of the bulk mail. Thank you. This is going to tie to Jesse Morgan's story. Not that, I'm sorry. We'll get to that. Do we have the picture of the bulk mail plastic bins? I thought I saw it. We'll find it for you. You might have seen it. I don't know if any of you have done bulk mail, but there's these heavy plastic bins, and you insert the bulk mail vertically, and you generally organize it by zip code to make it efficient. And Greg saw many of those being brought in to that counting center in Delaware County. That type of bulk mail. Here it is. These plastic bins right here. They're in different sizes, but Greg, you saw these types of bins in the Delaware Counting Center. And that's important when we get to Jesse Morgan's story here in a minute. So you have to control some of the ballots. We've shown how perhaps you can create persons like that and cast ballots on their behalf. And I would encourage you, again, to look at our lawsuits. You will see that there are ballots being cast for persons that didn't cast them. I'm looking right now. It's right there on the bottom, 29,000 in Georgia. No, I'm sorry, it's 15,331. Ballots that were not requested, that were cast. Right there. And that's in one category that we're seeing that. So we know ballots that weren't requested were cast. We know there are ways to create identities to cast those ballots, and we have sworn statements supporting that. So now how do you enter these ballots into the counting stream? How do you infuse tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of ballots into the counting stream? Well, we have with us Ethan Pease. Ethan was a subcontractor for a postal a company that delivered mail in Madison, Wisconsin. And he's going to tell you his story about backmarking ballots in the post office. Now, I want to say this. You've heard this pop up elsewhere. Traverse City, Michigan. Whistleblower steps forward and said the postmaster ordered him to backdate ballots. You all know about the gentleman in Erie, Pennsylvania that they claim recanted, but then he said, I never recanted. He overheard it. There's also Elkins Park, Pennsylvania, in which a gentleman was told that he must throw away or put in the bulk undeliverable mail, all Trump mail, and deliver Biden mail. There's a lot of whistleblowers in the United States Postal Service that give pause for concern. And Ethan has come forward and is going to share his story about concerns in Madison, Wisconsin.
Thank you, Phil. During the run-up to and on Election Day, I was working as a temporary hire at United Mailing Services, UMS, a USPS subcontractor in Wisconsin. I began employment on August 26th as a route driver and box truck driver. This meant my job was to pick up mail on a predetermined route and deliver it to UMS for sorting and metering. I would then take the sorted mail in my box truck to USPS. In September or October, I began to deliver mail-in ballots from UMS to USPS as part of my evening delivery duties. I knew this because there was special bins marked for ballots only. On one occasion, I forgot to retrieve the ballots for transportation and had to go back for them. After that, I always made sure to check that I had the ballot bins loaded for transport. On November 2nd, 2020, I noticed that there was only one ballot in the bin for delivery to USPS. And on November 3rd, Election Day, there were no ballots in the bin for delivery. One can imagine my surprise then when the next day, November 4th, I was asked by a senior USPS employee named Monte if I had forgotten any ballots the night before. Monte explained that an order came down from the Wisconsin-Illinois chapter of USPS that 100,000 ballots were missing. Monte then told me that his post office had dispatched employees to look for the missing ballots around 4 a.m., and that only 7 or 8 were found at UMS. Based on my previous experience and habit of double-checking for ballots, I believe that to be a lie. The following day, November 5th, 2020, I had a conversation with a different USPS employee named Rachel, in which she admitted that USPS employees were ordered to backdate ballots that were received too late to be lawfully counted. I asked Rachel if I would get in trouble with my boss for those ballots the other night, referring to the allegedly missing ballots I discussed with USPS employee Monte on November 4th, 2020. No, he responded, as long as they were postmarked for the 3rd. She continued, that's why they had us do that. I didn't bring any of this to the attention of my supervisors due to what I perceived to be their hostility towards President Donald Trump and their evident contempt for the law. I heard those same views making jokes about taking mail-in ballots for Trump and throwing them away. I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm not a Biden supporter either. In fact, I didn't vote for either of the main candidates. But something profoundly wrong occurred in Wisconsin during the presidential election, and the American people have a right to know about it. Thank you.
Wisconsin. Now, you probably caught that, but it is significant that Ethan firmly believes that he did deliver all ballots and that falsely postal workers claimed at a time when they were told to round up 100,000 ballots, found ballots within the stream of mail that he was responsible for. So perhaps Ethan missed those 8 or so ballots. Or perhaps there's an intentional insertion of fraudulent ballots that were completed by others into the stream of mail for ballots to be counted. Either way, these ballots were illegitimate in that they should have been postmarked November 4th and November 3rd. Now, falsely postmarking the mail is a crime. People don't do crimes idly. They do it for a reason. What could be the reason? Now I want to turn now to Jesse Morgan. And I want to set the scene a little bit and explain to you my initial interview with him in which Colonel Schaefer accompanied me. Jesse runs a mail route for his employer, 10 Roads Express. And from the end of September through October 21st, when this incident occurred, it's pretty routine. The post office likes routine. I mean, that's efficient. People show up at a certain time, they arrive, they dock, they unload, they load, they get to the next station at a specific time. And the post office keeps track of this all of the time. Jesse, I'll ask him to describe, because I might not describe it fully or correctly, but when he backs up to a dock, for example, for his trailer to be unloaded, well, let me back up. As he first pulls into some postal facilities, he shows his identity. It's a badge. And he receives a slip wherever he goes that identifies who he is, and the rider will come out, and they will use a scanner, and they scan. I'm going to forget all the things they scan. There's a dock scan, right? There's a dock scan, and he's going to do this much better than I am. I'm sorry, buddy. And then they also are going to scan a metal seal that is put on the back of that trailer that can't be opened unless you tear the seal. So they know nobody has been in to steal from that load or alter that load. It has a barcode on it. They will scan that. And then each of the pallets sometimes has data that they scan. So they're keeping track of all of this. Moreover, Jesse's driving a truck that has GPS that he can only drive when he signs in on an electronic board that keeps track of wherever he goes. There's also identification on the trailer so that they can specifically identify the trailer. Now, Jesse, during this time, by the way, that he's running this route we're going to be speaking about is using the same trailer. You love that trailer, right? It was a good trailer. It was a good trailer. It had suspension, right? He describes it better than I, but it kept good traction on the road. You can handle in water. It had some kind of lift on it. I don't understand. I have trouble changing. Like Jesse, I'm bad at this. He loved that trailer. It worked for him. He'd driven other trailers, and they were worse trailers than that one. So we had trailer 10R1440 all the time on that route. Now, Jesse would roll out of bed. He'd go and pick up his tractor, which was parked in the Auto One parking lot, which is a car dealership there in Lancaster. He'd do all of his checks. He'd get in his truck. He'd sign in, and then he'd roll over to the Lancaster post office, where he'd back up to pretty much the same dock, maybe another dock. And they would load him up, or did they already have you loaded? They loaded you? Already loaded or in process. He'd hook up his tractor. They'd get done with it. He'd check his load because one time he didn't and it shifted and he jackknifed on the road. It was a scary, scary event. And so he always checked his load. He'd walk in there, make sure it's balanced. They'd shut it, they'd slap on the seal, they'd do all their scanning, and Jesse's on the road from Lancaster, Pennsylvania to Bethpage, New York. And he loved driving into New York, especially that time of day, early morning hours. He'd leave, he'd roll out about 1 a.m., you'd get up to Bethpage 4 or so, 4:15, 4:20. Beautiful, seeing the city without all the traffic. He'd pull into Bethpage, back up to the same dock. The expediters are there. They had some small chat, but really weren't friends. Jesse stayed on his job. He was polite. Jesse, not political. He'll tell you, he didn't vote for either one. Doesn't follow the news much. So he's up there, and they're loading up these ballots. He didn't even notice this time on October 21st. He didn't notice at first that it was ballots, didn't think much of it. And he'll tell you about that, and then I'll come back to that. But his route's always the same. He gets loaded up, and he comes back to Harrisburg. Now, I want to explain something to you. Where's that? And you guys will understand this. This is not his truck. But generally, he's hauling from Bethpage what will go to Lancaster and Harrisburg. But his route takes him to Harrisburg first, which means you have to load Lancaster up there in the back of the trailer, the nose of the trailer. Yeah. They would load Lancaster first and then Harrisburg. So when he arrived in Harrisburg, Harrisburg could be taken off and the Lancaster load was there. And then he would drive to Lancaster. You can imagine the confusion and the delay that would be caused if Jesse decided he wasn't going to Harrisburg first, but he went to Lancaster. Then they would have to take off the Harrisburg load, then get the Lancaster load, then reload Harrisburg and have him drive to Harrisburg. So the post office has got this down. Despite all the complaints, they have all the loading and the logistics and the systems to run efficiently. So his typical day is that he goes down from Bethpage to Harrisburg, he unloads, pulls up to the dock, they unload, and then he's off to Lancaster, he unloads, he unhooks his trailer, he leaves his trailer there, he's going to pick it up the next day, drives back to Auto One, and then gets back home. Same way every time till October 21st. Now I want to share with you the first time I met Jesse and went up to his home. I'd heard about his story and Colonel Schaefer was with me. And I did what might be considered a forensic interview. It's conducted in such a way to assess the veracity of the person that you're speaking with. And generally what you do is you begin with questions that set the scene in which the witness has confidence, so that they gain their confidence. You let them know they're in control. They can stop the conversation anytime that they want. They can kick me out of the house. We had a video camera and he could stop the video. He could refuse to answer any question. He could ask me any question that he wanted. So I had Jesse set the scene. During the scene setting, he mentioned something to me. It was an offhand comment. He was telling me about his jobs. And he said, and there was a time there that I had some difficulty. And then he went on setting the scene. I knew what he was referring to, but he did not know what I knew. Jesse did not know what I knew about his background. So I let him continue setting the scene, and then I had him describe what happened. And all of it, by the way, is credible and matches up with the tangible evidence, how the post office works, and so forth. And so, as he was going through, and it was when he was getting done with telling me what happened, I said, Jesse, why don't you tell me about that little difficulty that you had? He said, what do you mean? I said, about your past. He said, what do you want to know? I said, the truth. And Jesse revealed to me that he had been a drug addict, that he'd been arrested, that he served some time, that for a while in his life he wanted to do things his way, that he violated probation, that he went back up, and that when he saw his first daughter born, he decided to turn around his life. And he's been sober since then. I said, you know this is going to come down on your head. If you step forward, this is going to come down on your head. There will be people who aren't concerned about what you saw. They will be more concerned about trying to destroy you because they don't like what you saw. And I asked him if he had told his 3 daughters that their father had been in prison. And he said he hadn't. They didn't know. Now they will. Now they will. This man is telling the truth. You can confirm the truth. We have a responsibility to get to the answers of the questions raised by what he saw. And if this nation continues in destroying individuals, rather than listening to what they have to say, I don't know if we can make ourselves out of this wilderness that we've created. I truly ask you to listen to what this man says, because he is a truth teller.
Tell you what, first time I met him, I was like, this dude's pretty cool. And then afterwards, I was like, this dude's an asshole. I want to tell you how I see it, and I'm a pretty straight shooter, all right? So be prepared, all right? They got me reading papers, and I don't like reading, I'll be honest with you, okay? I didn't want to come. I'll tell you what, I have everything to lose and nothing to gain from this, all right? Everything to lose, nothing to gain. And I'm already losing. Okay? So for me to come here, it was a big step. And for me to come here, it was just more so I had to put myself to the side and I have to worry about everyone else. Because I believe everyone else in America should know, all right? Just a little pass. He kind of gave you a little rundown. Yeah, serve some time, have some charges. You guys want to run with it, you can run with it. But this is what the real story is. The story is what we're here for today. I didn't want this put on me, but for some reason, it's on me. and here I am. All right. I drive tractor trailer for U.S. Postal Service subcontractor. I drive a route transporting mail from Lancaster, Pennsylvania to Bethpage, New York to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and back to Lancaster. On October 21st, when I arrived for my usual route in Bethpage, New York, an expediter made 3 references to ballots that were to be loaded into my trailer, including saying, hey, you've got a ballot today, or you have ballots today. And even showing me a piece of registered mail and saying someone really wanted their ballot to count. In total, I saw 24 Gaylords. Where's that, Bob? Right here. You got this guy right here. That's kind of a good representation of a Gaylord, all right? They're not usually put together with duct tape, though. Here you go. This is pretty good, too. But for a visual, I mean, that will work, all right? So, in total, I saw 24 Gaylords, or large cardboard containers of ballots loaded into my trailer. These Gaylords contain plastic trays, I call them totes, but trays will work, of ballots stacked on top of each other. All the envelopes were the same size. I could see the envelopes had handwritten addresses, return addresses, and I could even tell that one was marked registered mail. That one was off to the side, all right? They were complete ballots. I didn't think much of it at the time. At Bethpage, I was first loaded with 2 tall Gaylords. So picture that thing there, or this little representation here, like this tall, all right? So I was loaded with 2 tall Gaylords, okay? And that were, where was I at? That had mixed mail pieces bound for Lancaster. These Gaylords were loaded first because they would be the last off my trailer. The remainder of the truck was loaded with complete ballots bounded for Harrisburg. I then drove to Harrisburg with the ballots. Usually I offload in one of the 7 docks every day, but not on October 21st. I wasn't allowed to offload. That's different. Whenever I pull into Harrisburg, I go around and I get my dock and I get unloaded and then I roll out. Not that day, all right? Not that day. Instead, I was made to wait for roughly 6 hours in the yard, from 9:15 a.m. to 3 p.m. This really ticked me off, all right? Because my brother was in town. He just moved back up, and I wanted to spend some time with him. I tried to get the attention of postal workers, but no one would tell me what's going on. All of this was weird. I arrived at about the same time every day. The expediter scans all my seals and barcodes, and they unload me. But for the first time, but from the time I first arrived in Harrisburg from Bethpage, everything got weird. None of that happened. After waiting 6 hours, I went inside to figure out what's going on. I was told to wait for the transportation supervisor. This was also weird. 16 months I've been doing this. I haven't ever talked to the transportation supervisor for United States Postal Service. I talk to an expediter. I come in, I see an expediter. That's who I deal with. If I have an issue, it's the expediter. I don't deal with anyone else but the expediter. I never talk to the United States Postal Service's transportation supervisor. Let's make that clear. I have my own transportation supervisor for the company that I work for. He's the one that gives me the details. He's the one that I listen to. I don't listen to this guy. He's the guy that would contact my boss if he needs something ran different. I've never spoken with this transportation supervisor from the United States Postal Service. They don't speak to people like me. He's a top guy. He's the kind of guy that would speak to my boss, not a trucker like me. The supervisor told me to drive to Lancaster without being unloaded in Harrisburg. This made no sense to me. I knew the ballots were loaded for Harrisburg, and that if I was to go to Lancaster, they would have to off-unload my ballot or those pallets in Lancaster to take off Lancaster stuff, to put the ballots back on the trailer, to send it back to Harrisburg. Doesn't make no sense. This was a real screw up in my thinking. I wanted my ticket. So whenever I go to a place, when I go there and whenever I'll leave, I'll get a ticket. I'll get a ticket, a slip, whatever you want to call it. It's the date, time that I'm supposed to be there. It'll have my trailer number on it. It'll have how much I'm loaded. It'll have the seal number. It has my name. It'll have who was the expediter. So I wanted my ticket, my slip. I call them tickets. Some people call them slips. Okay. And then because I was there for 6 hours, I wanted my late slip too, because I wanted to be paid for sitting in that yard for 6 hours. So I wanted the ticket and the late slip for stopping in at Harrisburg. Also, I wanted it because if they tell me to take this load to Lancaster, I'm going to pull up to Lancaster with Harrisburg crap and be like, yeah, they just told me to come here and not have no ticket, because they don't look like I just came straight here, you know? Just to prove that I was there. And so others would know I wasn't the person that screwed this up. A ticket is always provided to a driver when they arrive at a United States Postal Service facility that proves you were there. The transportation supervisor refused to give me a ticket and told me to leave. I then demanded he give me a late slip, since I wanted to get paid for the time I was sitting there. And waiting for them to offload me. He refused to give me that too. He was kind of rude and wouldn't explain anything to me. He just told me to go to Lancaster. I then drove to Lancaster, unhooked my trailer in its normal place, and then drove my truck to where I always park it in a nearby lot, and then I went home. The next day, it just got weirder. As I arrived at Lancaster's United States Postal Service facility with my tractor, I went to hook up, and my trailer was gone. Not there no more. 10R 1440. Since I started driving that Bethpage route, I've always had trailer 1440. I like that trailer. It was a nice trailer. I know you guys probably don't really know nothing about truck driving or trailers or anything, but the rear tandems had if you're driving light, the rear tandems the front axle will actually go up. A nice air ride. The doors on it worked great. Some of the trailers that place has, you could honestly put it on the back of a carrier and drop it off in the middle of the ocean and no one would worry about it. So that trailer I really liked, okay? What happened on October 21st was a series of unusual events that cannot be a coincidence. I know I saw ballots with return address filled out, thousands of them, thousands. Loaded onto my trailer in New York and headed for Pennsylvania. At first, I didn't think it was a big deal. In fact, I thought it was really awesome. I really did. I was like, sweet, we're doing something for the presidential race. You know, this is cool. But as things became weirder, I got to thinking and wondered why I was driving complete ballots from New York to Pennsylvania. I didn't know why, so I decided to speak up. And that's what I'm doing today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Colonel Schaefer is going to demonstrate how we made an estimate of the number of ballots that Jesse had in his load on that occasion. And I want to remind you, we've received cooperation, not from Jesse, but from others, that this happened multiple times from that particular facility. Colonel?
Attorney General Klein, thank you for the honor of leading this investigative team. And as we speak, we have members of our team in the field continuing operations. Jesse has been put through the ringer. We have been intaking a lot of whistleblowers. They are brave people who seek nothing but to provide you the truth. And that's what we're all seeking here. So again, I'm grateful to Attorney General Klein for the benefit and privilege of doing this. And I think that's what we're all trying to do here today, is get to the truth. I'm going to outline some of Jesse's stories so peculiar and so troubling regarding what we now know to be fact. Jesse's one of those unsung, invisible heroes who works in the dead of the night that makes our lives, as he said, he has nothing to gain here, but everything to lose. And that's why it's important that we listen to him. So the first question we should all ask is, where's Jesse's trailer? Where is it? Where'd it go? What was the route it took after it left? I think it's a reasonable question, one that I think any reasonable American who's curious about 24 pallets of ballots, where they went. So we have a number of teams supporting the Armstead effort. One of them is my own London Center intelligence team. They did the estimate of ballots. So just so you all understand what we're talking about, depending on the density, depending on the trays, and again, this leads back to Greg's story, seeing these ballots showing up in the counting rooms in the middle of the night. That's the pointing into the spear. We trace it back through all the different machinations to Jesse, to his mass transportation of these things. And I can tell you, other investigations that are now ongoing with our field elements are developing the next set of leads. It doesn't stop at Beth Page. It only begins there. And as Phil said, all investigations start with questions. We have additional questions we're now going to answer. But to the point of this, 24 gaylords full of these things, not mailed like they normally would be. And let me make this very clear. The Bethpage Center is not a place where you can frank or process mail. It's a bulk mail center. As a matter of fact, it's called and distribution center. That means big boxes and big things go through. You don't take in envelopes. You don't take in little pieces of mail and put them into big bundles. These things were bundled. They were on trays. They were processed. They were curated, if you will. These were ready to be counted. That's what makes this so important. So depending on the density of these things, it could be 144 to over to 250,000 ballots. Let me tell you a little secret. Part of our developing investigation indicates that Jesse wasn't alone. There was a number, as in like a bunch of different trucks, which engaged in this. So when you think about the magnitude of potential votes showing up the night of the election after midnight, you have to have an artifact. So if you eliminate the impossible, with all things being equal, whatever remains must be the truth. The truth is, ballots showed up They were counted. They do not match necessarily the records of who should have voted. In some instances, the stats don't add up. And we continue to analyze that. With that said, I believe, beyond a shadow of a doubt, we have evidence of a massive transfer of completed, curated ballots ready to be injected into counting centers. Thank you. And we'll be continuing to take in, we'll provide information later regarding where you can email leads to as well. We'll put that later. Yeah.
Okay, we've got a few more things, and then we'll get to questions and also mailing and leads. Thank you, Colonel. I wanted to relate to you one of the things we did to double check Jesse's story. We called in what we call a red team, which are postal experts from around the nation. We didn't tell them Jesse's story. We put them in a room and we said, create a schematic of the flow of mail in the United States Postal Service so that we can know where you might fraudulently infuse mail into the stream. So they worked all day. They created the schematic. They put it up on a room. It's still in one of the rooms over here. And then we stepped forward and we told Jesse's story, and it matched up perfectly on how you would insert fraudulent mail into the stream. We then asked these postal workers, and I think we asked them to identify all the anomalies. What is different from the normal day that Jesse experienced? What processes changed on this day that were similar on every other day? And it reminds me of a case. I did a murder case in 2007 of a man that I had alleged that he kidnapped a 13-year-old girl and murdered her in 1974, I think it was. And back in that day, in 1974, this man was working alone as a custodian at a high school. And we were able to identify by other witnesses and by putting together pieces that for the last minute and a half of the last time she was seen alive, for a minute and a half, he was alone in that parking lot outside that high school with her before nobody saw her. And when you look at the investigative material at the time, what you saw is that the FBI or law enforcement, his local law enforcement, went over to his home afterwards to question him back in 1974. When they opened up the trunk of his car, and in it, they found some things. They found a butcher knife. Well, he explained that his wife needed new cutlery, and he went shopping for it. They found twine that you could use to bind a person. And he said, well, you know, sometimes you need twine. I keep it in the trunk for convenience. Okay. They found a canvas bag. That canvas bag was big enough in which you could put a body in, and it was a canvas bag that those janitors wheel around at the high school, that they put the trash bags in. And he said, well, my trash bags are kind of weak. I just wanted to have it. They found hydrochloric acid. He said, well, you know, I'm doing an experiment. I want to clean my driveway. And his driveway was gravel. And then he said, we found this chlorophyll, 18 drops of which could kill a person, and less than that would incapacitate a person, especially a 13-year-old girl. And he said, well, I wanted to get high with it. And then there was a pillow, which he said was his niece's, and there was a blonde hair, and the victim was blonde. He's serving life in prison. He had an explanation for each piece of that evidence. But when you add up all of his independent causes of that evidence, the odds that this janitor would coincidentally have left the pillow of his niece in his car the day he bought cutlery for his wife when he was going to do an experiment on his driveway and get high and had a canvas bag for trash is unbelievable. There was one causal agent for all of that activity. He kidnapped, raped, and murdered a 13-year-old girl. Now, I say that about the power of what's called circumstantial evidence. Crimes do not occur with people watching. In fact, most people don't want to be watched when they commit a crime. And so we have to piece together circumstantial evidence. In this room, there's all kinds of DNA. I'm losing it by the minute with my hair shedding. But if you found my DNA in this room, you would know nothing about whether I was involved with the murder that occurred tonight unless you understand the circumstances. I don't like Hollywood for this, and we always warn juries about this. There are no devices that solve crimes. I can't take a device, hand it up to Jesse's mouth, and through the ambient air determine that he ate pepperoni pizza 3 weeks ago next to a woman wearing Parisian perfume and had an element of smoke in it, and the cigarettes are only sold in Paris, and you're guilty. We don't have those things. So we put together logical conclusions based on the information that we have. Anomalies. What should have happened in Harrisburg? Jesse's trailer was immediately unloaded. It was not unloaded in Harrisburg, even though his trailer contained mail for Harrisburg. Jesse should have been quickly unloaded and able to proceed. Jesse was forced to wait without explanation in a parking lot in the yard of that facility for 6 hours without explanation. Well, perhaps maybe there was a new person operating as an expedite. Perhaps somebody was sick and somebody forgot. Perhaps. Jesse's only exchanges, pleasantries, and small talk with others who talked to him at U.S. postal facilities. Postal supervisors don't talk to drivers. All of our experts say that. Jesse talked to a postal supervisor. Normally, Jesse receives a ticket that proves he was there. That was refused. Now, that wasn't an accident. That was intentional. That was no, you received no ticket. No explanation. Jesse unloads his trailer in Harrisburg before proceeding to Lancaster. Jesse was told to go to Lancaster while carrying the Harrisburg mail. Maybe we've got somebody who doesn't know how the Postal Service works. Maybe we've got somebody who didn't communicate with the postal supervisor who gave that order. Perhaps there are independent explanations for all of these, but you can imagine the odds of all of that. Today, he carried completed ballots across state line from New York to New Jersey, across the state line of New Jersey to Pennsylvania, where his trailer full of ballots disappeared. Jesse usually leaves his trailer at the dock in Lancaster at the end of his shift and picks it up the next day. It's gone. Where's Jesse's trailer? Only Jesse drives his truck, but there's been some indication since somebody else has operated his tractor, according to the digital logins. The odds of this having independent causal agents for each one of these anomalies is astounding. Most likely, and in fact, I would say, probable cause to believe, most certainly, that all of these were caused because they could not open up the back of that trailer and reveal its load to people who might not know about those ballots. They put the ballots on the wrong truck. And they picked the wrong man. Because here you have a man who's willing to tell the truth about what that load is. We'll entertain questions.
Seems like the truth.
Yes.
Amy Barr, having this event, just came out with a statement to the Associated Press and said that he's found no evidence that would swing the election in any direction. What's your response to that?
Well, I would say an investigation is needed. You know, you find evidence when you investigate. Well, as it relates to Mr. Morgan, we've been in very recent contact because we just come into a full understanding of his story, as well as Nathan. Lindstrom has provided testimony before. We received requests from the California, from an office, a field office in California. I've reached out to United States attorneys, and we're in Pennsylvania, and we're in the process of reaching out to United States attorney in New York. and also local law enforcement as well. Yes, sir. I'll tell you what we know, and of course we're continuing to develop evidence as Colonel Schaefer said, as we can. Of course, I don't have subpoena power. Some of our litigation we can search for it in discovery, what's called discovery, but we would encourage law enforcement to become involved. What we know now is that Mr. Morgan transported these ballots that were completed across state lines, and we received cooperation from others that occurred on October 21st, and from another source that this happened multiple times from that specific facility in Bethpage, which, as Colonel Schaefer mentioned, and as Mr. Morgan mentioned, cannot process mail. These bulk mail ballots should never have been there or received there. In fact, we're aware of complaints that were issued because of that. Yes. Oh, repeat the question? Yeah, thank you. Do I have any evidence that these ballots came from outside the United States? And do I have any evidence of where they originated? Not at this time, but I will tell you that experts that we're working with say we can easily determine that if we get access to the ballots. You know, there's the type of paper that's used. There's the type of markings on the ballots. You can tell whether the ballot was cast by a machine or by human hand. There's all kinds of ways, if we gain access to these ballots, that we can pull information to either validate the election count or invalidate the election count. So again, this is another example of why don't we have access to those ballots for that type of analysis? It can be done by experts. And we've been asking for that, and we will continue legally to try to seek that. But excellent question. You don't know until you get that ballot under analysis. Yes, ma'am. Okay. The question is, are we alleging that the ballots were what? I'm sorry. Who do we allege completed the ballots, and where do we believe that they were completed and filled out? We are with what Jesse saw, and now we're asking those questions, and we're investigating to find those answers. We have some leads, but I'm not ready to share that at this time. I can tell you, as you have probably inferred, that this evidence that a person transported completed ballots that were already ready for counting and put in these bulk mail trays from New York to Pennsylvania, and that Mr. Stenstrom on election night saw those very same types of trays bringing in ballots late or early in the morning on November 4th raises serious, serious concerns. We do not know, but we intend to find out. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned at the beginning, thank you. You mentioned at the beginning that that the whistleblowers here were taking great chances. Jesse even mentioned that he may lose his job. You also he
shouldn't, by the way.
He should not.
He should not.
You exhorted the media to look at the story and not into his past, given the history that we have with the legacy media in this country and abroad. I'm almost certain that Jesse's entire history is all over the internet by now. So what this is obviously a deterrent to whistleblowers who may be tempted to come forward. What do you have to say to the media about that, but also say to potential whistleblowers, how are they protected? What is in place for them to be sure that they can come forward safely and tell their story? We've seen two people here today who are nonpartisan, who want the truth to get out. What can we guarantee to any individual in the United States of America who wants to tell their story? How can we keep them safe? We know of at least one witness who has come forward with Sidney Powell. That person is in the hospital with injuries because they told the truth.
Well, there are no guarantees. There are no guarantees unless we have a culture that is respectful of the value of each and every single individual and believes that each and every individual in this nation has a right to speak about what they saw and speak about what the truth is. And that requires a rejection of identity politics. It requires an elimination of the toxicity of our national dialogue. In short, it requires maturity that we have not shown in some time. I do believe most people know the path to that proper conduct and that respect. I believe that. I think people are fearful to take that path for whatever reason, a desire to be first or a desire to appease somebody whose opinion they believe they need to appease, or fear of a result. Either way, it makes no difference. We need to start changing things. I would encourage anybody out there who is concerned about whistleblowers. Now, I didn't promise Nathan or Jesse anything. That was important because I knew that if I did, you would ask, and then you would assign a motivation to them for coming forward that was not present. So I was actually placed in the position of not offering anything to them, and I haven't. But I would encourage those who know about this story to do so. If either of these gentlemen lose their job, they shouldn't. In fact, if you could call their employers and tell them that they've got excellent persons working for them, that might help. I don't know. But there ought to be support for whistleblowers. And I hope that some type of action is taken, and I hope they feel free to avail themselves of that support if they suffer economic hardship. And the mob frightening and terrorizing people because they speak, we have to stand up and speak against. This doxing of people, this assault upon individuals, this identity of their children, that's not America. And I believe most Americans know that's not America. And we have to stop listening to it and reject it and collectively search for the truth. So, thank you for raising that question.
Yes, sir. One more question. This is Sean Lim from NTD.
Yeah.
Attorney General Barr just stated about 20 minutes ago, he said the DOJ hasn't yet to find widespread voter frauds that could have changed 2020 election. Do you have any response to that?
Now, will it change the outcome of the election? I don't believe that's a valid question. You can't even answer that question until you search for the truth and launch a full investigation. I don't know how these ballots were voted. I told you, based upon the evidence that we have, how certain partisans can gain advantage to be able to be investigated. Not, is the fraud we're investigating sufficient to change the outcome of the election? I mean, that's kind of backwards, I believe. And honestly, I don't know why the media would ask that question. The American people have to decide, is this overwhelming evidence of fraud within the election deserving of an answer? And when we get the answers, we'll come to know whether it would have affected the outcome. Yeah.
Testifying that there was 100,000 ballots.
We are, I'm sorry, we're keeping their statements, we're providing their statements to law enforcement, and this stuff is under investigation, so they're not responding to questions at this time.
Okay.
I will answer a question if I can.
So the statement is that there were over 100,000 ballots on the morning of November 4th to backdate. Are there any other witnesses to corroborate this, to your knowledge?
Well, the witness would be who he spoke with at the Postal Service. So he was told on two different occasions by two separate persons the same thing when they were in the room together. And so one corroborated the other by saying the same thing. That's cooperation. But also,
Are there other statements from those individuals?
I don't have statements from those individuals, no. Not at this time. Any other questions? All right, we thank you for your attendance. Well, those are
All right, there you have it, a live look from Arlington, Virginia, where the Amistad Project held a press briefing with 3 election whistleblowers. We've been hearing from them for the past couple of hours or so. Those whistleblowers detailing the evidence that they have of unlawful actions made by elections officials, as well as widespread illegal efforts by postal workers to influence the outcome of the 2020 election. And we are keeping an eye out to see if we can go back to the election integrity hearing that we have in Michigan. So we can go back to that live. We do have that feed for you. Let's go back there.
Do the right thing. Pay attention to Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2, and name the electors for Donald Trump. And I really appreciate you listening to me. Well, good timing.
Perfect timing, yes. Thank you for your testimony. I know that we're planning to hear from Jesse at a later date, so thank you for that. Do any other members have a question? All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Did Maria come into the room by any chance? No, okay, well, we'll call on her later then again. Oh, this one here says that she's unable to be here, but she's attached the affidavit, so. That brings us to Joe Farkas. Joe Farkas, followed by Terry Begas, followed by Vicky Collar. Is Vicky here? Why don't you come on up? If Joe Farkas or Terry Begas can hear me, come on this direction towards the room. After that'll be Nancy Tissio.
Hello. Good
Welcome
afternoon.
to the Senate committee, Vicky.
Thank you.
You have 3 minutes.
Okay, I start off like, my table that I had was, they didn't get very many ballots, probably 200 for the most nights, so we weren't that busy. But so one thing I had seen was the truck that came in between 3:30 and 4, and there was golf carts, and I was sitting on one of the golf carts back there because my table wasn't doing anything, and I was just sitting there, and I seen the door open. I heard a lot of commotion about what were all these ballots, and then so I walked over and I went by the door, and I seen the white truck from the city. Looks like, you know, the citywide pickup trucks, and they had the symbol on it. And there was one guy driving it, and he had a mask on, but looking at his eyes, you know, he had, I would say, Asian descent. And I know he brought in at least 3 dollyfuls of the boxes, the white boxes with the paper cardboard on them, and took them over by the platform that the people were standing on. Somebody did mention, like, where did they come from? He goes, I don't know, I'm just the driver, was his statement. And that's basically, you know, I don't know where the ballots came from. I know it was after 3 o'clock in the morning that they came, and there was quite a few of them, and there was quite a few people that seen it come in, and they looked just like the ballot boxes that were brought to the tables, and you could see the yellow envelopes of the voter bag, you know, that were in there.
I don't want to rush you. Can I ask a question or?
Yeah,
okay.
I just.
So were you watching them open the boxes after they were unloaded?
No, I did not open, no, because where they took the boxes at was over, because I was back by the back door, because that's where my table was at, and I didn't want to leave that table, because they kept, like, every once in a while we get a stray ballot. So I just had watched him take them over by the table, and I know I counted at least 3 trips, but I don't know if he made any more, because then I went back to watching my table.
All right. Does any other member have any questions? Okay, thank you so much for taking the time to come in.
Right, thank you.
Joe Farkas. Is Joe here? Terry Begas. Terry here?
Oh no, they don't want to get
And just in
shot
case
by
I'm
putting themselves
mispronouncing
on
that
live
last name, she's
television.
from Plymouth, so Terry from Plymouth. Nancy Tissio,
I'm the moderator.
Oh. is that you? All right, great. After Nancy, I have John McGrath and Donna Ross. Welcome to the Senate Committee. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm from Macomb County, and I was a ballot challenger on Monday the 2nd at TCF, and on Tuesday, the election day, I wanted to work at the polls because I heard, things about the polls. So on Tuesday.
Can I interrupt you for just a second? Can you talk a little louder for the microphone? That'd be great. Thank you.
So Monday I worked at TCF, and I watched them. On Monday they were taking the ballots out of the outer envelope, and it went pretty smooth. I have to admit, there were a couple things that concerned me, and I addressed them. One was 80% of the ballots that were at my table, 93, were closed with packaging tape, and I thought that was odd. 83%, like 80% of the ballots were closed with packaging tape. That seemed different to me. Another thing that I thought was like horrible is that whoever like marked the outside, the ballot number on the outside of the outer envelope, they wrote it in a light green crayon. And so you couldn't, 6 feet away, you couldn't see if that ballot number matched the ballot number that was marked on the outside of the envelope. And what I thought was odd was the people that were just taking the ballot out of, they were taking the ballot out of the inner sleeve, these two ladies, and they were turning it around so that the number would be on top. They'd take it out, they'd open it up, they'd look at it, fold it back up, put it in to make sure the number was on the top. But they had ink pens, and I thought, why did they have ink pens by where they're at? So I kind of brought a lawyer over, and we thought, why do you need an ink pen by where they're at? All their job was to turn the ballot over. So that day wasn't, that bad. Then the next day I went to Henry Ford High School. Is that right?
You have 1 minute left.
Oh, Henry Ford High School. And when I was the only Republican in the gymnasium. There were 6 precincts. And after about 2 hours, I realized they were giving out ballots to people that had an absentee ballot red question mark next to their name. And so I kind of stopped the process, and we went around and everyone was giving out ballots to people that had that question mark. And we ended up calling the war room in Lansing, because I said, no, they have to call the clerk and have the ballot spoiled before they can issue them another ballot. And they didn't agree with me, so we got that straightened out, and that was true. They had to call the clerk. Well, the clerk wasn't answering. They weren't getting any answers. So I know they were just continuing to give people ballots that had, the question mark, because no one would answer at the clerk's office. When I went to precinct 275, the girl, I said, what are you doing when they have the question mark? She goes, oh, I just write their names down. And she had a list of 25 people. I go, no, that's not the process. And she goes, what do you mean? And it turned out she wasn't even a poll worker. She was supposed to be a Democratic poll challenger. But when she got to the building, she didn't know what she was doing. She didn't, she wasn't trained well, because she didn't even know what her job was.
Thank you.
All right. But then three people got 2 ballots.
Thank you. Senator Lucido.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Nancy. You mentioned lawyers. How many lawyers were there?
There was probably 5 Democratic lawyers.
5 Democratic lawyers. How many Republican lawyers?
There wasn't one until 5 o'clock. I was at 6:30 in the morning. She didn't come until 5 in the evening.
And what time did you get there?
6:30.
What time did you leave?
8:30. I finally left. None of them could, balance their.
Did any of the lawyers or make statements regarding this hand truck, cart, dolly that had all these ballots in it?
No, that's at the TCF. I was at a high school.
Okay,
But the one lawyer said, well, he was gonna take that list of 25 and he's gonna spoil the ballots. I don't know.
all right, that gives me some idea. But there was no lawyers where you were, except Democratic lawyers? How'd you know there were Democratic lawyers?
I was the only Republican in the whole room.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Oh, boy.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Did you submit
Oh,
things in
boy.
writing?
I did, and a video.
Okay.
And it
Thank you.
goes on and on and
John
on.
McGrath. Is John here? And after John, Donna Ross, followed by Eugene Greenstein. Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee, Mr. McGrath. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Chairman McBroom and committee members. My name is John McGrath. I'm a registered voter here in Michigan. On Wednesday, November 4th, I learned that tens of thousands of ballots had arrived at TCF Center from Wayne County, which was after the election deadline of 8 p.m. on Tuesday, November 3rd. Surprised and concerned that so many ballots appeared after the election deadline, I felt compelled to drive to TCF Center to volunteer as a nonpartisan election challenger. I witnessed ballot after ballot being counted for unlisted voters. Unlisted voters or ballots not registered in either the electronic nor the supplemental paper-based absentee voter poll book. The unlisted voters had no dates of birth in contrast to the registered voters. The poll workers continually, and they were being instructed to do so, I don't blame them for this, but they continually entered the default birth date of January 1st, 1900 into the computer system to process these votes. Since working at the TCF Center, I've read where some leaders of the Michigan legislature indicate that they have not been made aware of any information that would change the outcome of the election.
Forget about it there, Pablo.
I wish that were the case. Tens of thousands of ballots arriving after the election deadline provide a minimum of tens of thousands of reasons to investigate and audit these ballots. I've also read where some leaders of the Michigan legislature indicate that Michigan's certification process should be free from threats and intimidation. The problem is that Michigan's certification has not been
Who is that,
free
Christy? Who?
from threats and intimidation. I refer this committee, I refer the people's representatives in Michigan to the affidavit submitted by Ms. Monica Palmer, chairperson of the Wayne County Board of Canvassers, and by Mr. William Hartman,
1 minute.
member of the Board of Canvassers of Wayne County. And finally, if you read their affidavits, that is for Ms. Palmer and Mr. Hartman, it is clear that they did not certify Wayne County's results. And since they did not certify Wayne County's results, how can the Board of State Canvassers certify any results? It's a mess. It's a mess for the Michigan legislature. But it's time for the Michigan legislature to step up
And do something.
step in. And because at this point, I don't see how you can send any electors to the Electoral College. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGrath. Do any members have questions? Thank you for your time today, sir.
Thank you, Chairman.
You turned in written testimony?
I will.
Thank you.
You want me to bring it to you right now?
If you have it available, that's
Yes.
very convenient.
Okay.
How convenient he has it right
Next,
there.
I've been informed that
Moving on.
Ms. Terry Begas is now here. Please come forward. After Terry,
Watch out for the Clintons.
I have Donna Ross, followed by Eugene Greenstein.
You don't want to be the next Jeffrey
And-
Epstein.
I guess that's as far as I go. Thank you. Welcome to the committee.
Hi.
You have 3 minutes.
Okay. I after hearing how the method of voting that we were going to be doing this year, I decided to try to make a difference and volunteer I wanted to work at Cobo initially. And so I became certified as an independent poll challenger. And we take it seriously. And this one lady, we went to this one woman's house to do a mock poll challenging, a mock, election voting process stuff, and learn as much as we could. And it was helpful. And when I was there, I witnessed a video of the workers, the poll workers from Detroit, Wayne County, and it was sickening how they were training them that we were the enemy, we were to be the enemy, they were to block the votes, or not block the votes, but block the view of what was going on, to keep us 6 feet away, taught to intimidate us. It was
Hey guys on YouTube, if you can't hear anything, please let me know.
I'm not sure if it was on YouTube or what it was, but
Speaking of YouTube,
it was sickening. That's not what we were taught. We weren't taught anything like that. We had rules to follow. We had regulations to follow. We had to wear lanyard around our neck to identify that we were a poll challenger. I was with an independent company, so it said poll challenger. But anyhow, I got cold feet and decided, because of what I saw on the training video, I anticipated problems at Cobo, and I was apprehensive. So I chose Dearborn for 2 days. I did Monday and Tuesday.
my hometown.
They asked me Tuesday night if I wanted it. Got a call. They needed help at Cobo Wednesday. I was beat. I had worked long hours both days, and I said no. However, Wednesday morning, I got a call to action. Pardon? Yeah. Got a call to action Wednesday morning that they needed help. They were understaffed there, and about the treatment that was going on is what I have heard said today, is what I heard what was going on. And I said, BS, I'm going. So a friend of mine and I got in the car and we came down. When we came down to Cobo, we drove down. We went in, we walked in with a lawyer and some other people. There was no security guard. We parked on the roof of Cobo, and there was no security guard when we walked in. The other gal that went with me was being trained in the hallway. I was already certified, so I wanted to go back to the car to get my phone off the seat. So I went back up to the roof where I came in the door, and there was a security guard now there. Uh-oh. Do you want me to leave you hanging?
Well, you've written it down.
Can I finish it? Can I finish my sentence?
If you can finish in 15
okay, so there
seconds
was a
or so.
security guard there, and I had to have other people get my phone for me because I couldn't leave the building. What I didn't get was there were 3 people that they said if us 3 people leave, there was a crowd of people that they couldn't get in that were volunteers. And they said, if we're leaving, there's 3 of us leaving, can 3 come in? He said, nope. And it was all supposedly due to COVID and overcrowding. Come on. We know how big TCF is. No.
TCF is huge.
Thank you.
But anyhow, I was there when they boarded up the windows so we couldn't see in, and I missed going into the counting room just by a hair. They had called in some independent poll challengers, and I turned around, anyhow, they swooped them in there, and then there was nothing for hours. We went upstairs and there was nothing, no more people going in, but there was media going in, there were attorneys going in, but no poll challengers, no.
Thank you for the detailed account in your thing that you passed out to us.
No, that's it, because I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't on the.
I said thank you for it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I thought you were asking for more.
No.
Okay, I should know.
Do any members have a question for Terry? No. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for coming. Next, I have Donna Ross. After Donna, Eugene Greenstein, followed by Sylvia Halpert. Welcome to the Senate committee, ma'am. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Senator. My name is Ronna Ross. I have spent my life saying, oh, no, it's It's Rana like Donna, but not Rhoda, not Rhonda, not.
If it's any consolation to all of you today, my handwriting's not that great either. So, but I have a 2-letter name, so I get away with it. But please go ahead, Brana.
Thank you, Senator.
You have 3 minutes starting now.
Okay. I want to demonstrate to you just how official the harassment was
So
at
here we go
TCF
with the harassment again.
on November 4th.
Here we
I
go with
got
the harassment again.
At 1 p.m., having been told, we need Republican poll challengers. And I went running down, and I had been certified as such. But we couldn't get in. And so an hour or two later, I thought, well, maybe I'll try, I'll be an independent poll watcher. So I switched lanyards, and now I'm independent. And eventually I was able to get in, but not until 4 p.m. And I had gotten there at 1. When all these pizza boxes went up so we couldn't go in, there was just a mob of people waiting to be poll watchers. And
I still want to know why the windows were covered.
came out,
right?
And he had a very big presence and very big man. And he said, please, I need room, everybody back. I'm the lawyer for the city of Detroit. So it's like, okay, and I have something to say. So he then introduced a man who told us that he was in charge of the poll watchers, monitoring them. And people say, well, and he said, and there are every single Republican challenger is here. I was like, no, they're not. They're not at all. And he said, well, there are 130 whatever signed. I went out for sign in. Turns out you were supposed to sign out at the same place, but there was no signage. And the exit was 50 feet away. So when you wanted to leave, you're
Full information on how after Mr. Greenstein, I have Sylvia Halpert and Dr. Linda Lee Tarver.
Thank you very much, Senators. I wasn't planning on speaking today, but today, thank you. My name is Eugene Greenstein. I'm from Farmington Hills. I was a poll chairman in Detroit on Tuesday, November the 3rd, and a GOP challenger on Wednesday at TCF, answering an emergency request for challengers. And my basic comment is there needs to be a forensic audit. Why do I think so? I observed that envelopes, which were scanned in some cases, would have a different ballot number than was on the envelope. I was at board 55 in TCF. The ballot number, though, was in the poll book, as was the number on the envelope. The situation would result in a challenge ballot. The situation should result in a provisional ballot because there's no one knows who voted for anything because they didn't match, excuse me. And other situations, which I just is how is it that there's this lack of integrity between the envelope and the ballot, which results in a counted ballot, when on Tuesday, I knew who voted at the polls. This absentee ballot process is a total disaster in terms of accountability, opportunity for fraud, etc. And good people can want to do good things and bad people can want to do bad things. And I think we've seen a lot of problems here. Voter and the ballot don't go together. And that's my comment. Thank you very much for listening.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Greenstein. Any questions from members? No, thank you for coming. Appreciate it. The email that we've been using for this committee is Senate Oversight Chair at senate.michigan.gov. I know that's a little bit of a mouthful, so, but if I have a spare card somewhere, I'd write it down. The next up, we have Sylvia Halpert, followed by Dr. Linda Lee Halpert.
Yes,
Welcome to the committee. Thank you.
thank you. I'm a registered voter in Oakland County, and I volunteered at the TCF Center in Detroit. Our family immigrated from Canada. I love this country. And what I saw down in the TCF Center made me very sad and disappointed. Let us know that we were not welcome, very unfriendly, and at times to look at the ballot. She turned aggressively, brandishing a long metal letter opener to the gentleman, and in a threatening manner pointed the sharp object. He backed up and she took a step forward towards him, still pointing the sharp object at his chest and repeating, "Back up." She said it at least 4 times. Another time I was standing more possible for us to see what he and anyone else was doing at the table. And clearly that was his goal. Several of us challengers watched quietly for over a long time for the military ballots. At one point, several police officers came in and stood between us and the ballots, a little over to the side, but a man came up and said we were to disperse. I said we were being respectful and standing more than 6 feet away. He said it has nothing to do with COVID. You are interfering with the process. We were standing quietly doing nothing, but we spread out in the aisles like good little sheep. We couldn't see, of course, from there. I watched workers take hours sorting military ballots into containers labeled with corresponding precinct numbers. In all our time there, I never saw those ballots being taken and processed. It was a long lag time, and during that time, the people at the counting board sat idly doing nothing. Wait, about 4:30 or so, it was starting to get dark. We left the building. That night at about 10:30, I received a call from a gentleman whose number I had gotten while I was there. He said, "Are you still in the building?" And I said, "No, I'm getting ready to go to bed." He said, "Well, we've been following a truck and it just entered the TCF building. Can you watch for it?" And I did, and got one of the ladies who testified today and to look for it. When we came out, cardboard with another large crowd was out front of the building complaining they were not allowed in and had been there for hours. Some of them up on the roof, and there had been a man up there keeping them out. And we talked to some.
I'm sorry, ma'am, I didn't give you a 1-minute warning, so please go ahead and wrap up your comments.
We just talked to a couple of newspapers and TV news and went on home. But that's only a small portion of what happened.
Thank you. Do you have other written for us? Thank you.
Not today, but I will send it to you. Can you tell me that same address again that you told?
It's Senate Oversight Chair at Senate.Michigan. Thank you very much for taking the time to be here. Next, I have Dr. Linda Lee Tarver, followed by Marilyn Fine, followed by Michael Haynes. Hi, Dr. Tarver.
Thank you,
Welcome to the
Senator.
committee.
Thank you, Michigan Civil Rights Commissioner, a retired state employee, and a Republican activist. I'm a public servant under 5 secretaries of state, including Richard Austin, Candace Miller, Terry Lynn Land, Ruth Johnson, and I was delighted to retire under the current Secretary of State. I have been under 7 years under Secretary of State Ruth Johnson. In that role, I was the Community Affairs Director and Election Integrity Liaison. I assisted in preparing cases for referral to Attorney General Bill Schuette to prosecute for voter fraud. Ballot harvesting in Detroit, Flint, and Pontiac has been going on for decades. It's a misdemeanor to give your ballot to anyone not allowed by law to receive it, and it's a felony to take that ballot. People have been prosecuted in Michigan over the years as a result. Ballot stuffing, ballot curing, and complete fraud in the issuance, handling, and processing of ballots has not been addressed, and no election after 2020 should be considered fair unless we get this right this year. The complete hate, disdain, and apathy for Republican poll challengers is but one way of how elections are stolen in Michigan. Before COVID-19, and I'm talking to the Democrat in the House, and in every election in the last 25 years, Republican poll challengers were removed by the police, especially in Pontiac. MCL 168.733 says in the urban areas, never, never, never in the urban areas in the 34 years I've been working for the state of Michigan, and certainly not, shall not threaten or intimidate. It is a misdemeanor for what they have done, these inspectors, to continue to intimidate and throw out Republican. There are touch points in the process for these ballots to be, and the accounting to be done, those ballots to be opened. In order for this fraud to be corrected, we need a complete audit. You need to have optics on it. This has always been done in communities of color. It needs to stop. Enforce the laws and ensure, bring in independent inspectors. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Tarver. Any members have, Senator Tice?
Thank you, Dr. Tarver. I appreciate you coming, and I appreciate your testimony. Also very compelling. Do you have, when you speak about an audit and a complete audit, what would you see as the appropriate type of audit? Would it be a forensic audit? Would it be a hand recount of ballots? What would you like to see done?
71% of Detroit cannot be recounted, which means that the boxes that the ballots are in cannot be opened. 71% is egregious, and it happens in these communities of color. So if you cannot recount it because of a, quote, clerical error, according to Secretary Benson, these are not clerical errors. These ballots are hidden in. You can hide them in there until you're able to open them. There are processes that have been allowed so that when you cannot balance your precinct, you can go to a counting board or a board to evaluate them. At that time, those errors are supposed to be fixed, and they can open up the ballots. The only way to open up the ballots right now to get your ideas on it is for you to do a complete forensic audit that needs to be done to open up those ballots. Because a recount is only going to get you 71% of the ticker tape that says these are the numbers, and they're bad ballots inside. You cannot look at the ballots if you do a recount.
Thank you.
You need an audit in order to do a forensic audit to look at those ballots. Some absentee ballots that were coming in were not even folded. How do you have a pristine, flat ballot without being folded if it was an absentee ballot? And therein lies some of the problems. And once it goes into the machine multiple times, you cannot open up the case. If you put the wrong number on the seal, you can't open it up. If you put in, it doesn't balance, you can't open it up. And so there's problems with what's going on. We need to open up those ballots for the integrity, because we cannot move forward in any further election.
Can I ask a very appropriate process once you get done with the election and you've done the ballot count and you realize that they're not balancing? What would the appropriate process be right then?
The precinct inspectors or the precinct captain, who is supposed to be trained, are supposed to contact the clerk's office if there's any problem with balancing. You're supposed to know and have your hand on how many provisional ballots, how many spoiled ballots, where are the missing ballots, what's going on. You're supposed to take care of it at the precinct level and then close your precinct. But if some reason you're not able to, there's a counting board where you take your ballots to turn them in to say, I testify that I did this and I've got my paperwork, I've got my poll books, I've got our electronic poll books. And that counting board is supposed to say, you're not in balance. Let us open up that container and make sure those poll books are we can look at the ballots. We physically can look at them. But in these urban areas, they're lazy and they're not taking this, the civic right very seriously, or their duties very seriously. They take an oath when they do as a precinct inspector. They're not taking it seriously and have not for years. And the apathy toward the official duties here has become egregious, because once they decide not to balance that precinct, then it goes through and you have the hot mess that you had, where you have these canvassers, board of canvassers, 4 people that is supposed to amen that hot mess. Flint has never been able to balance. Never been able to balance. And there's touch points across where they have the ability to open that up, to do a quote, honest open of the ballot itself, the container itself. If you're not able to open that container up, which after it leaves the counting board, you're not able to do it unless you get a court order or an audit. And no one has been brave enough to do it. 71% of Detroit cannot be recounted. We have nothing. And when we did a recount before, we saw some of the most egregious things when we looked through and did recounts before in Detroit. There's some things in there that should never have been in there. And that is what I'm telling you about when you're able to open up those ballot boxes. But it is not going to be at the Detroit canvasser level, and certainly not at the Michigan State Board of Canvasser level.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tice. Vice Chair Irwin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony. Just a couple of questions for you that I'm going to ask you based on the fact that you've been around for a while, you've been an activist, you work for the Secretary of State's office, so that's why I'm going to ask you these things. So I think my first question is, are you aware that there are audits done on past elections, and in any of your official or unofficial capacities, did you ever have the opportunity or cause to review those audits that looked into things like, dead voters and all that kind of stuff that we've done in the past?
Yes.
Okay, and did you find that the answers to those questions were that, in fact, these were clerical errors in previous audits that have been done by the Legislative Auditor General and been before this committee in the recent years?
So I've worked with Chris Thomas for years, and I've submitted some illegal stuff that I felt was illegal to them to investigate, and they were investigated. How they remedied it was not according to what I felt was necessary. There have been clerical errors, if you call it clerical. The law concerning your ability to be a precinct inspector or poll worker is that you have to have a sufficient clerical acumen in order to perform the duties, which means you should be able to read and write and add and subtract. And you should be able to perform the duties without any inhibitions. We know that there are over 500 precincts in Detroit, and many of the people who will come and get trained, some of them will not show up. But the ones that do show up, they are not given sufficient training on how to legally perform the duties that they have. However, if they're told that the challenger is the enemy, this person standing behind you is the enemy, and they have not been told that the person behind you must be protected, you will not be able to address some of the oversight, laziness, ignorance of the law, ignorance of the process, and lack of training. And so one of the ways that ballots are, the election fraud occurs is when you have workers who are not properly trained. And that's where we are finding is lack of training. They're in a hurry. They're not sure what to do. But those clerical errors are mixed with clerical errors, but a lot of them are considered fraud. I would have referred all of them to the Attorney General if it were me. But Chris Thomas and others decided not to. They tried to remedy those things as best they can, but unless you put the full faith into the law and start prosecuting people, we will continue to see what we've been seeing. 71% of Detroit cannot be recounted. And I would not want to run on a Detroit city nothing. at all. I would not want to run in the city of Detroit knowing that Detroit with a stack of 75 ballots, Janice Winfrey is standing next to me. And this guy is not related to all of these people. He's not a postal worker, nor does he work for these are ballot harvesting has been going on. Inez Brown in Flint has been, the clerk of City of Flint has been complaining about it. These are not clerical errors. These are what's been allowed. And when you have drop boxes for all of these urban areas to make it convenient, you do not have the ability to check the drop box that I'm putting in 50 ballots. If you don't compare the signatures, you toss the signature out. You don't compare the signatures, you're supposed to. It's in the law. We are not following the law, and we are not following it in every election. And the larger the jurisdiction, which are people of color, people who look like me, the more fraud that can be inserted into stealing an election. And that is a problem, and we need to stop it.
Okay, I almost am afraid to ask another question.
Ask the second question.
You've read the audits, you've seen them. We both read the audits.
They know me still.
Yeah, I know. I'm glad we both read the audits. I'm just putting it out there that in fact it is part of Michigan election law that we have audits, and those audits have been done in recent elections, and they'll be done after this one as well. And I just want to put that out there. And then also, I want to.
You're talking about a
post-election. That's
yes, but
that's what the law says.
They're insufficient.
I appreciate your
They're insufficient for what the purpose is. I'm asking for a forensic audit of the election itself, looking for the fraud and illegal votes.
Yes, and I'm wondering why the Trump campaign didn't want to do a recount, which would have been the normal process.
Why would you recount 71% of the votes cannot be recounted?
That's a problem. I want to agree
I'm just telling you,
why
waste your money and time? It costs money to do a recount. Why waste your money when 71% seen?
Okay. And that goes back to my next question.
I'm not paying $2 million or $4 million for 29% of the ballots that can be counted, because the rest of them cannot be counted.
That's one of the reasons why I voted against the changes to the recall law that made it so onerous and difficult for people who wanted to look into these
Open
issues.
up the ballot.
Where there's a discrepancy at that precinct, those precincts should be recountable, and we need to find a way to make that so. And I think that what you're going to find here in Lansing is that there are a whole lot of Democrats who are going to agree with that. We want these ballots to be looked at. We want elections to be run in a safe and secure manner. But the problem is that this legislature has been controlled by Republicans since the 80s. The state Senate has been controlled by the Republicans since the 80s. And so my question to you is, after the 2016 election, when we saw the problems that we saw that you just hinted at, when we had agreement apparently between a lot of folks about the fact that these precincts should be recountable, why did we see no changes in the law to address any of these issues while we had a Republican governor, a Republican House, and a Republican Senate?
That's a good question.
So I'd be happy to answer that question. That's a very simple one. We have sufficient laws on the books. So my brothers and sisters in the Republican GOP has done their due diligence to pass laws, make laws. The enforceability of the laws, however, because in Grand Traverse County, we're not having this problem. In certain Detroit, we don't have that. So if you want Republicans to pass more laws, why don't the Democrats in their cities enforce? I just gave you the law.
This woman.
It's a felony for me to give my friend, next door neighbor, my ballot. It's a misdemeanor for me to give it to them, and it's a felony for them to turn it in. A felony. It is not enforced. And we have situations in the inner cities and these Democrat-controlled areas, because that's what we're talking about. Democrat-controlled areas cannot seem to balance their elections. And because they have been habitual violators of the inability to balance their election because of either ignorance, apathy, lack of leadership, or lack of caring about their election integrity. Because if you add more laws to the books, you still have people who will not follow the law. And if you don't enforce the law, if you don't bring in Republicans to say, I am going to be a poll worker, if you need 5 Republicans in the building, make sure 5 workers are. Contact the Michigan Republican Party. Ask them for 5 people or 25 people or 200 people to work it. And then when the challengers come in, you protect them. You don't put them out. You don't call the police on them. You're supposed to protect them according to the law. If you follow the law in the urban Democratic controlled areas, then we would not be here today. I certainly wouldn't be here. But in 25 years that I've been monitoring elections, working with the Secretary of State, the last 8 doing election integrity, it's been a hot mess in the same Democrat controlled areas. We don't need any more laws. We need to enforce the laws, and we need to open up the doggone ballot boxes.
But we are agreed that we need to change the laws on recounting precincts. We do
Thank
agree
you.
that we need to change the law on recounting precincts, right?
Pardon?
We should change the law on recounting precincts. That was
We're not changing the law for recounting.
But the question was about that specific law, allowing the recounting of imbalanced precincts.
No, we're not.
Change that law.
We're not trying to talk about recounting for imbalanced precincts. The balancing of the precinct can come at the counting board level. You think that the ballots come out and then all of a sudden it's given in and locked up in a box. It is not. Once it leaves the precinct, it goes to a counting board. They have the full authority to open up that ballot box because it's not balancing. If the seal is broken, if this is broken, they can reseal it at the counting board. There is a law with the counting board, and it's lazy in the inner cities of color, of people who look like me are not doing their job. And it needs to be done so that we can count 100% of the precincts instead of 29%. That's what needs to be done, is to make sure people are doing their job. You won't get that in an audit. What you will get in the current fake audits that we've been having and these fluff audits that we've had right now, you will get, well, these can't be recounted, so okay, so we can't do that. Here's what we can. You will get an audit of the 29% in Detroit that can be recounted. That's all you're going to get. Because we need to see the 71% of the fraud that has been locked up and will be destroyed after so many years. That's what we need to see.
Thank you.
Thank you,
I'll take
Senator.
any other questions.
Thank you, Senator Irwin.
Woo!
Thank you.
Woo!
Mr. Chairman, and
Yeah!
thank you, Dr. Tarver. I gotta tell you, I
Go,
can't agree
girl.
with you more.
Yeah!
My whole problem is sitting in this chair today and leaving this Senate to go prosecute those crimes.
That pretty much says
Why was it when the
Get it,
Secretary of
Shawty.
State, which you were there how many years?
I've been with the Secretary of State 29 years.
29 years
And
up in
in
the
this room,
Secretary of
over
State, and she ain't
6.5
seen nothing
hours.
like it.
And the irony is,
You heard
it's
her.
about the same issue. If the people are doing their jobs and the integrity of the vote is being respected, we wouldn't be in here today.
That's right.
2 is 71% can't be counted because
Of fraud or apathy or incompetence or clerical error or all of the above.
So we did some testimony, and the chairman was gracious enough to bring in 3 separate identifiable clerks from 3 separate identifiable counties. We asked these questions. How many of the ballots weren't signed that you didn't count? How many didn't look like signatures? I mean, we went into the deep dive because there's so many people that are so disenchanted. I don't want them to give up on the vote. I want them to remember that people sacrificed their lives for these amendments.
People who look like me died to get the right to vote. And I'm telling you, it is sacred.
And this discriminatory practices with women not getting the same right that men years ago. If it's a felony, it's a felony. If it's got to be prosecuted, it should be. Otherwise, the whole fabric of this entire nation falls apart. Discrepancies in the precincts, I get it, to my colleague up here. If you're going to have discrepancies, as if it's an easy fix. But I'm not hearing things from all over the state. I'm hearing them in segregated areas, and I think you are targeting these areas by saying people are either inept to do their job or they don't care about doing the job.
They have either been instructed not to care or have been allowed to, over the decades, not to be held accountable for the lack of accountability in the sacred vote. When you have gone so many years, people do not want to be called racist.
Right.
And if you're going into urban areas, in particular Detroit, you're hearing, why are you trying to disenfranchise the Black vote? You are racist, racist, racist.
I think that's.
That has been the mantra to allow for the 71%
White guilt.
of no accountability when we have safeguards in place to ensure the balancing of the precinct and the seal that is not broken.
Dr. Tarver, those ballots are not of color. They are one color.
That's right.
And they go in and they have parties on them. And the disrespect that I've heard throughout the process in Wayne County, in Detroit, only leads me to believe that even an audit process, and I got to ask this question, if 71% can't be counted,
Cannot.
the audit process to spend the kind of millions of dollars that it would take, and I really don't even know what CPA firm or what firm would do an audit. Have you, in your almost 30 years with the Secretary of State, could you identify a firm that specializes in election audits?
We'd have to bring in the federal government. The forensic audit that is needed is not going to be what has been done in order to open up those ballot boxes, which we need to.
So
that's where we need to open up the ballot boxes.
So if this has never been done, in the history of this country, I'm asking this question: does the legislature cumulatively or collaboratively work on a standard that would be the audit process? Because the next thing I see is that there's going to be debate over the audit process.
I don't see the legislative body, this body, passing any law to change anything, because must balance is not going to force Detroit to balance. Must balance is not going to force Inez Brown, the city clerk of Flint, to balance. Must balance. She has never been able to balance since she's been an election clerk there. So she's never balanced. Pontiac won't balance. There's a few other places, mostly urban areas, that will not balance. And they don't have to be as large as Detroit. They just won't balance. And if we don't have a mechanism in place, because once you pass a law that says we're going to do this, it is not going to be heeded, because then if you try to enforce it in the urban areas, you'll be considered a racist. You'll be considered disenfranchising the voters. You're just trying to check on us. Oh, Black folks from Detroit need to have our whatever 71%. If you can't count it, you can't count it. And this Secretary of State will call it small clerical errors. And that is the mantra and talking points that should not be done. This is not a small clerical error. If there is fraud in those 71%,
make no sense if the vote doesn't count and it doesn't accurately reflect what's going on. But
that was certainly the sentiment expressed at our joint committee's first meetings by all members.
And at the end of the day, though, if we don't have the capability of resurrecting this wrong to accurately reflect what the vote is, how did it get so disenfranchised that we all are sitting here today hearing ballots brought in at 4 a.m? I must have heard it 20 times, maybe more. Ballots that were going through and counted 8 times. Ballots that weren't signed going through, or the signature appeared, or the date. 1900.
Oh yeah, the constitutional issue and the constitutional issue that the president is arguing, which is a valid one, is that the equal protection under the law, it's required under the Constitution, and this is the president's argument. Me in Lansing, Michigan, if I sent in my absentee ballot, I didn't sign it, or I voted straight Republican and straight Democrat, my partisan section should be spoiled, because they should not be curing it. And that is being cured. If I did not do what I needed to do, my ballot won't count. But if the same ballot was sent in Detroit, it is cured, which is fake, trying to interpret the results, and it is accepted if I don't sign it in Detroit. In Lansing, my ballot won't count. In Detroit, it will, and I should be able to have equal protection under the law. That is the Constitution. We treat it fairly, regardless of where we live in Michigan. Will my vote?
Definition of cure. What do you mean by the definition of cure?
So the curing of the ballots is if you're not able to, you've got an absentee ballot and it is kicked out. Because if you're sitting there, your ballot is kicked out if there's an overvote or if there's an undervote. You can, if there's an overvote, let's say it says vote for not more than 2 and you vote for 3. It's an overvote. It'll kick it back out if you're at the precinct.
And you have a chance to
and you have a chance to cure your own ballot.
To redress the wrong.
Correct. Ballot. But if it's an absentee ballot,
yes,
it is not supposed to be cured.
It is not supposed
no.
to be. It's supposed
your
to be.
Partisan
it's a spoiled
section,
ballot.
It's no, that section is spoiled. It's not countable. But the nonpartisan section that you did correctly is supposed to be counted.
So let's go by example. I vote straight ticket, Democratic.
And Republican.
Or I vote straight ticket, but when I get to the judges, choose not but one, because they're nonpartisan.
Right.
That part.
Right.
I choose 2.
Mm-hmm.
What happens to the ballot?
So your ballot counts, but if it's an absentee, that particular judge is not, it's not counted.
Nobody gets a vote.
Correct.
Okay. At the end of the day, I sat here as a legislator for over 6 years now.
Mm-hmm.
I sit in this chair and I wonder why the Secretary of State, if you have to request a ballot in a primary for Democrat or Republican, why they just can't make 2 ballots, all Republican, all Democrat, and send them out so it can't get spoiled. You can't make a mistake. You can't go across the center line.
That is what occurs during the primary. So each group, Republicans and Democrats, decide who's going to be on their ballot.
But if you don't want the ballot to be spoiled and not counted, and you want your vote to count, and
you can split your ticket in the general.
But I'm
Correct.
saying in the primary, do you see why asking for a Democratic or Republican?
No, I would agree with you.
Because now it's an impossibility to spoil that ballot.
That's only in the primary.
Right. But that brings the next level of seekers to move to the general. And if the ballot was spoiled enough times, that seeker may not get the opportunity to serve.
I agree.
Okay, one more thing, and then I'm going to call it because
I hope so.
No, but you know what? I'm tired of sitting here and trying to defend.
I'm just giving you a hard time, Mr. Vice Chair.
Just go ahead. Give him all the time he wants.
71% not being able to be counted, which means
71% not being able to be recounted.
Which means, do we ever get the opportunity to find out what the hell happened?
You will never know what is actually in that box, in the ballot box. You're not able to determine if those who are those ballots are even duplicated. If you see people sending in 3 or 4 times, you don't know.
So that statement of 71% has been stated out in the public. You are aware, being with the Secretary of State's office, 29 years, that's a long time. At the end of the day, does this give rise for the Attorney General to make an investigation and inquiry why 71% of that vote went that way?
Yes, I would believe that, again, if there is impropriety, that is where the Attorney General can investigate. I've prepared referrals to Bill Schuette for election crimes. We've had people in Michigan prosecuted for voting in Michigan and at their summer home in Florida. We've had people who were not here legally, non-citizens, vote in Michigan. We've had tons of people who voted twice, voted in person and absentee and they're doing it in large clusters in these urban areas. It is a problem in the Democrat-controlled areas. It's not the problem with the laws on the books. It's a problem in the Democrat-controlled areas, and the laws need to be enforced. And if they cannot be enforced, they need to at least bring in the federal government to do an oversight and administer elections in these urban areas, which have been routinely unable to be balancing at the end of the day. We have too many touch points where those things can be balanced, but we are not. We have an apathy, a corrupt, either apathy or a corrupt system, and for some reason we have no appetite with this governor, secretary of state, or the attorney general to do anything about it at this point. This is too egregious and too much fraud that it should have been already investigated.
Well, we have seen prosecutions in election fraud, such as Southfield.
Mm-hmm.
There is selective prosecution in certain areas. At the end of the day, perfectly, I mean, these are credible people that are testifying here, including yourself.
It is COVID, before COVID, and even with COVID, COVID does not change the law. The law was not changed to accommodate COVID. The people who are the challengers are required and need to be protected in order to see the process. They can challenge the voter, they can challenge the precinct inspector, and they can challenge the entire process. That's what the law says, 168.733. That's what the law says. But we also have laws on the books that allow for people, the public, to view. And we also have laws on the books, but if they're not going to be enforced because it's an urban area, we have laws that says that people who should need assistance should be able to have assistance in voting. And some of these precincts did not have handicap and disability procedures there. Voting by mail disenfranchises a lot of people who cannot read and write, who need assistance, who need some assistance in the voting process with the machines that will read the ballot to them. And so this is the problem where we're not allowing, we've used as an excuse COVID, but we are not allowing what needs to be done to be done. Just like the children who are not in school with disabilities are not getting the special care that they need, neither did the voters here in Michigan. They did not get the special assistance that is required by law. These special assistance, even those people who are blind, people who need Braille, people who need special audio equipment, we have those at every precinct, or it should be at every precinct, so that the people of Michigan will have everything they need to vote. And that is not being done in the urban areas. And people don't want to touch Detroit, but it is not a sacred cow anymore. It is looking like a cow, but not a sacred cow anymore.
I want to say thank you to the chairman. I've gone way over my time.
So have I. I'm sorry.
You know what, though? These questions need to be answered because all of us are here because of this.
Thank you.
And I appreciate the
Thank you.
discussion.
Thank you.
I do want to say, I wish that we had the opportunity to bring you in on a time. I mean, the agenda today was really supposed to focus on TCF, but out of respect to you and your experience, that allowed us to go off. But we may need you to come back when we
Call me
get
anytime.
more into that specific subject matter. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Irwin.
Yeah, I'd just like to make.
Sorry, did I miss your?
No. I'd just like to make a request that before our next hearing, I'd just like to make a request that before our next hearing.
Members, Vice Chair Irwin would like to speak to us.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a request that before our next hearing, we get some basic information about the facts that we can get in front of all the committee members. Because I think it was at our first hearing, maybe our second hearing, where one of the good representatives also mentioned this figure that 72% of the precincts can't be recounted. And, I received communication from the Secretary of State saying that's not accurate. It's actually 28%. And that's a pretty huge discrepancy. I brought it up at the time, but we've heard this over and over and over again. I mean, we're hearing the same, quips, and the greatest hits right here. But that one we keep hearing over and over again.
No truth.
And it's just not true.
As-
Right, and so I think that unbalanced precincts and making sure that they're accountable is an important thing, and I think that we should, take a look at this, but I just
Whether
wanna
it's 21 or
point out that at least
79%,
the information I got,
regardless.
maybe that's wrong, is that it's actually the opposite, and I wanna make sure we're dealing in accurate information.
Mr. Vice Chair, thank you for bringing that up.
But
And
that
I
is true.
pledge to you that by our next meeting, I'll have some, yes.
It's
Senator Tice.
28% of the in-person were recountable, or were not recountable, and 71% of the absentee were not recountable, is my understanding.
I will strive to
And that
have,
distinction is super important, because when you say
There you
that
go.
71 or 72% of them are
Right.
not recountable,
That's different.
that obscures some key facts, and it also obscures the fact that there are fewer absentee count boards, a smaller denominator, which is affecting that percentage as well. But yeah, I just want the facts.
I will work to get us those facts for our next hearing. Thank you. We have a few cards left. We are nearing the end. Are you Ms. Fine?
I am Ms. Fine, and I'm
Thank you.
here, I'm
Fran
here to
Fine?
nominate Linda Carver as next Secretary of State.
So,
And
so thank you. I have Ms. Fine, and then on deck, Mr. Haynes, followed by Patty Kamagata, and then Eddie Kabasinski. So if you're on deck, please be ready. Go ahead, Ms. Fine, you have 3 minutes.
Thanks, I'm from Ingham County. I'm here today not to talk about COVO, but I want to give you something that's along the lines of what Dr. Tarver talked about, and that's following the process.
Were you at Kobo?
I was not.
Can I ask you to delay this to another time or to submit in writing? Because I'm supposed,
It'll take 1 second.
I know, but I've already disqualified other people who weren't
Well,
at
then I
Kobo.
would be disenfranchised, wouldn't I?
No, I give you time to report in another time or in another
It's
way.
just one thing. Yeah, I will. I'll give it to you. It's just one thing, and that is Michigan Law 168.765, and that has to do with the privacy envelopes. Ingham County, Meridian Township, and Clerk Barb Byram, and was told that we didn't need privacy envelopes. We were told by the Michigan Election Commission that we didn't need them because there were municipalities who didn't have the money to buy them or print them. It's bunk, folks. You need to look at every aspect of what isn't being enforced. I sat in Meridian Township and saw people's ballots. They said, can I put this in? I don't have the brown envelope. Oh yeah, we'll take that. Subsequent to my affidavit of facts, I also spoke with Lansing City Clerk Chris Swope, at a function. And he said, oh yeah, we accept those all the time.
Okay.
So I'm just asking that you look at that.
Thank you.
Check out the COVID, and I'll give you this, but thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sure.
Perfect. Michael Haynes. I hope I'm reading your name correctly. I thought at one point it was Hayes
No,
or,
it's not. I will stand corrected. My name is Michael Hayes, Hayes.
okay, thank
If
you.
you're from the east side of the state, just like the street, right, Pete?
You got it. Hayes Road.
After Michael, it's Patty Kamagata and then Eddie Kabasinski. You have 3 minutes, sir, please.
Okay. I'm stale of, because I think you heard the same thing from a lot of people. I don't have much to offer, and the reason why I say that, I wasn't able to get into the ballot room, add to what's already been added.
You can find this after the
on
fact.
Morning of the 4th.
You can finish watching the
But
hearings.
I was there. until
I'm sure they're on
8:30,
YouTube.
9 o'clock PM on the 4th. But
The
I will tell you
stream
a few
seems like
things if
it's
you wanna
really
hear
bad
and
playback,
go
like nobody can
judgment
even hear what I'm
Add
saying.
maybe to some of your
But
thoughts, I will add. But
this
as
is some
far as
compelling
seeing
stuff,
fraud
people.
itself, I didn't see fraud,
keep it in mind.
but I don't think they need
Click
any more
subscribe.
examples that a dog wags its tail
Watch another video.
than what I witnessed in that day. A dog wags
This is
its tail.
compelling stuff,
That
guys.
means he's happy. Something
We
happened.
need to look further.
You don't go into the amount of disclosure
Over
that
and
I
out.
witnessed
Peace and
in that
blessings.
whole day of my time voluntarily to know a dog wags its tail.